now the Blue Bear. So those two fish boils are no longer available, but there's several others. Pelletier's, the White Gull Inn is supposed to be a good one.
Interesting.
Yeah. Have you ever had it? Have you ever tried it?
No.
No. It's an acquired taste. I happen to like it. My wife is so about it. But
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool because, you know, you fly to the island, because the one guy'd like to do it, because I flew down to the Eclipse. So that was pretty cool.
oh. Yeah,
So,
we do visit Washington Island, but we take the ferry.
yes.
Yeah, we've never flown up there. I know a lot of people fly in during the Oshkosh thing, and there's a barbecue festival that they have, and people fly in from different states on
Cool.
Washington Island. There was an interesting story in the Sun-Times this morning, Chicago Sun-Times. A whooping crane, a young whooping crane, I don't know if you'd still call it a colt or not, landed in somebody's yard in Wilmette, which is a northern suburb of Chicago.
Huh.
And by luck, the neighbors where the bird landed, they knew there was a birder nearby, maybe next door, and told the bird enthusiast, what is this? What's going on here with this very large crane? And that woman, that was really fortunate. She knew exactly what to do. She called the Illinois DNR right away, and she called the Crane Foundation in Wisconsin, in Baraboo. And they scrambled in Baraboo, got a veterinarian and 3 or 4 others, and grabbed their crane suits, their costumes, and they drove down to Chicago. It took them 3 hours. And in the meantime, they told everybody, don't use your lawnmowers and don't walk your dogs. So people went around the neighborhood telling people not to use their lawnmowers, not to walk their dogs, so they don't spook the bird. And the person in the crane suit puts on a hand puppet, and the hand puppet looks like the head of a crane. And it grabs some grapes, and it eventually lured. It only took 10 minutes, and eventually lured the crane to him or her. And then they put a hood on it and grabbed it. The veterinarian checked it out, and then they drove it back to Wisconsin, and they let it loose at Horicon.
Which is probably where it came. I mean, they can tell by the banding exactly where it originated from. So
yeah, they had a number for it, and it actually had a name. Its name is Animal. And it had, like a number, 16-33. I guess there's only like 800 in the world or so. I mean, so this is a real rare bird. It's the second rarest large bird in the U.S. I think condors are the first rarest, but yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Interesting. Great. Well, we're going to get started. It's 10:01. Welcome everybody to the Digital Forum meeting on this nice, what looks like going to be a warm but windy Saturday here in Wisconsin. I already have it at 65 degrees and sort of crazy for this time of year, but hopefully you'll stick around for a few hours, listen to some new things, and then go out and enjoy the weather before the next set of storms come rolling in. Because it sounds like Greg told me he's got storms over by him. Undoubtedly, they're going to hit us sooner or later. So, couple announcements. We've got, let's see, next month, the speaker is, I should know this off the top, Russell Graves. On shooting wildlife images that win photo contests. The rest of the summer we sort of have open. I'm still working on getting some speakers in. So we'll see what we get this summer. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with me and everybody else. But there's a lot of new Photoshop and Lightroom stuff popping up. So we'll have plenty of things to talk about this summer. Also wanted to just promote that besides the Wacko spring competition, which will be, I think it's May 3rd, or is it the 4th? God, I lose track already. May 4th, which will be video on Zoom for everybody to watch the final round being judged. If you're interested in watching, just send me an email. If you're entering the competition, a link will be sent out to all the people that are on the uploader so that they will have a link to watch the final round of the competition. Also that same weekend, if you don't feel like watching Wacko judging, Old Falls Village in Menominee Falls is holding Revolutionary War Days for the 4th and the 5th, reenacting the Revolutionary War. Great place to get some photos. So stop on by. It's a $10 entry fee, which is pretty reasonable, and you could spend from 10 o'clock till 4 photographing all these reenactors in Revolutionary War, not civil and that, but Revolutionary War. They also will have coming in June World War II reenactors. So Old Falls Village is doing a lot of reenactments this summer, so might be a fun place to go out and shoot. I think that's about it for announcements. So let's just get started. We've got Greg Holden, a photographer from Longmont, Colorado, showcases how he views the world through his photos. He prefers capturing unique everyday scenes rather than typical landscapes. While he appreciates beautiful landscapes and sunsets, he focuses on abandoned location, highlighting the textures of old vehicles. Greg, who owns over 180 photography books from used bookstores, draws inspirations from photographers like Minor White, Steichen, Stieglitz, and more. He enjoys sharing his photography passion at local camera clubs and virtually across the U.S. His website is imagesunderfoot.com. Greg's here to talk about black and white photography, I believe, if I remember everything. So let me switch you over to Greg here.
All right.
Welcome, Greg.
Hey, well, good morning, everyone. Well, we'll just jump into it. Before I get started, I will say, feel free to stop me at any time if you have questions. I'd rather talk about your question on the slide that we're talking about than at the end. But you're welcome to ask questions at the end as well. But feel free to stop me at any time. So let's go ahead and share the desktop. It's easier. All right, is everyone seeing the presentation?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, great. All right, so this is a presentation I actually developed many, many years ago, and it's evolved a lot over time. But I developed it for a camera club I was a part of a number of years ago because we were finding that a lot of people in the club were really struggling with how to create interesting black and white images. And we're trying to get more people to try out black and white and submit black and white to our competition. So this kind of has evolved since then, but hopefully give you some ideas and show you some good ways to think in black and white. So we'll start off with this question: do you need color? So a number of years ago, I was at Eastern State Penitentiary. This is in Philadelphia. It's a closed down prison that you can tour. And in one of the cells, they have this door there. And I was really captivated by the colors, the greens there on the wall, as well as the door. And there's a lot of texture, and there's just some soft light coming in from the window there in the prison. And so this is how I saw it in color, obviously. And then this is how I envisioned the final print to be, is a color image. And but then I was looking through my archives one day, and I said, well, what photos do I have that maybe I could try in monochrome that might be able to make a successful monochrome? And so this is and if people can mute, I hear like a dog barking or something like that.
Appreciate that. That's me, sorry.
Okay, all right. All right, Jeff. So converted this one to monochrome. And I think this one, it looks good in monochrome. We can still, I mentioned some of the key things. To me, I did like that color green, which I lose in the black and white. But I'd also like the texture and I like the shadow. I just like the graphic shapes. So all that is still captured in the monochrome version. We'll talk a little bit more about why that works well. And so this is a photo where I think it could go either way. You could present it in color, it looks good. You present it in monochrome, also looks good. So that's sometimes the case, that photos can look good in either. This Fowler toad was at a little park when I lived back in Maryland. And I'm laying on the ground with my macro lens. And I was really captivated by kind of some of the texture on his face, but really that eyeball, that nice golden color in his eye, and then kind of reflecting some of the light coming through the trees and the black part of his eye. But as I look at this image, my eye gravitates to the background, to that nice, pretty grass green color in the background. And so even though I initially focused on the eye, because that's the sharpest part of the image with my shallow depth of field I chose here, my eye wants to float away from that. And so I don't want the viewer to go away from the subject. So I said, well, how can I, I've already tried limiting my depth of field to keep the background nice and blurred. And so that wasn't enough. It was that color was distracting. So going to monochrome gets rid of that problem for me. And so now my eye doesn't have colors to pull my attention away. So now my eyes are going to focus on what are the brightest part of the images, what are the sharpest part of the images. And then I go right to that eye. And maybe my eye wanders a little bit around the frame just to see the rest of it. But I feel it gets anchored a lot more on that eyeball, which is where I wanted that attention. Now, I did lose the golden color around his eye that I did appreciate in the color version. So sometimes with monochrome, we do have to make some sacrifices. Get rid of one distracting color, but that means I also have to get rid of some of the colors I like, unless we start doing bi-color imagery. And I'll show some of that later. This is a abandoned school in Pennsylvania. I was there for a workshop, and then during a break, I got up in the balcony and shot down on this piano. And there's this really nice light coming in from there's a big bank of windows there in the auditorium. And I just love not only the decay and stuff of this image, but these wonderful browns. The piano has this wonderful chestnut brown color on it. And then there's some nice rim light and some brown colors in the chairs. And that was originally captured my attention. So when I saw this image, I said, this is a color image. That's how they process it. So again, looking through my archives, saying, well, what else can I do? And I often will do this on bad weather days, like if there's a big snowstorm, kind of trapped inside, but feeling, kind of creative mood and can't get out to photograph. I'll go back through my old archives and see how I can maybe reprocess images. And so this is one where I said, this is a lot of graphic shapes, kind of like that door we saw earlier. And it's got some negative space. And so maybe that would work well in monochrome. So this is a monochrome version. And I think it's okay. I don't think it's a bad photo in monochrome. But for me, I feel I've lost the best parts of the image. Those brown colors, I felt really added to the image. And yeah, I still have the nice lights. I'll get the little rim light on the chairs. Obviously, the piano is still well lit and jumps out. So this is a case where, although the black and white is fine, I don't think it's the best way to present this image. For this particular image, I think the color is the best way to present it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into this presentation. So when we're looking for photos that we might be really great subjects for a monochrome conversion, there's a couple different areas, kind of topics we want to maybe be on the lookout for. So light and shadow is the first one. And I like this quote from August Sander, a German photographer. In photography, there are no shadows that cannot be illuminated. And I think this is really key for monochrome images, that we really can do a lot more with the shadows and a lot more with high contrast. And we'll see some of that coming up. So when you're out photographing and you find a scene that has an emphasis on light, that might be a good subject for a monochrome. We can get rid of some of those distracting colors like we saw with the toad. If we have high contrast light, A lot of times those are difficult to photograph in color and maybe will look better in black and white. And so, as we said, take away the color, we can really appreciate the light because we're looking at the tones of the image. So when you're out and about and you find a subject, look for something that has a single light source, like think of like a spotlight on it, or it's high contrast or dramatic lighting. Those are good images that might work best in monochrome. So here I am early morning down by the water in Maryland where I used to live. These gentlemen were here building this hotel. And so kind of framed up, I liked the interaction of the two gentlemen and then surrounded by all these graphic elements, the different I-beams and stuff like that. But every time I look at the color version of this one, my eye doesn't rest on the two gentlemen. I kind of gravitate to them initially because, yeah, they're bright. They got the white hard hats on and those red vests. They're life preservers because they're working on the water. They're actually on a barge here. But then my eye starts to drift towards the background. I drift to this guy on the right there in the teal shirt. And of course, he's got a life vest on as well. And then my eye kind of drifts behind the gentleman where I don't want you to go to this kind of red highlighting whatever. I don't know if that was just the light on those beams or there's some safety tape up. And then I see the yellow coffee cup there on the left. And my eyes is going all over the place and it's not resting on the parts of the image I want the viewer to rest on. So I said, here's a case where, color is kind of distracting. And to me, this image is all about the light. So I don't need color to tell this image. So going to monochrome, that gentleman now in the teal shirt kind of fades into the background a little bit. Coffee cup, you don't even really notice there. The red lights in the background, now we just have some highlights. So those highlights actually kind of nice element. They kind of replicate some of the other architectural elements we see on the right side of the image. And so here's this case, I think monochrome is a better way for this image. So I keep focus on the things that are important. I hide the distractions of the other things, and then it keeps emphasis on some of these lines and shapes. This is hiking a mountain. This is Old Rag Mountain in Virginia. And so this is with an iPhone. This is just a quick shot. And so one thing, throughout my presentation, you'll hear me talk about always taking photos. You just got to constantly be practicing. And I know some people, they go out, they see some interesting scene and they say, well, I don't have my SLR with me. I don't have my tripod with me. But most of us carry a smartphone and the cameras on those things are getting darn good. Or even better these days. So I encourage people to always take the picture. So here I'm on top of this mountain and I see these three rocks and there's some strong light on them. It's very harsh light, casting some dark shadows. And I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And I'm hiking with my family. I don't have my camera gear with me, but I take out my smartphone and take an image. And then later process the image actually right on my smartphone using an app called Snapseed. You can now get Photoshop, I think, and Lightroom right on your smartphone as well. So here's a histogram. You see it's distributed by M, kind of pushing off to the right there, the highlights and the clouds and stuff like that, starting to get clipped a bit. And so this is the processing that I did, just very heavy, high contrast to this image, which in monochrome, you can get away with a lot more with that dramatic light and that harsh light than you can in a color image. And so here's a case like this image, this is taken with like an iPhone 5 or 6. This is a number of years ago. So this is not a high quality image. I'm never going to submit this to a camera club or to a gallery or anything, but I still took the time, right, to take the picture, to process it, to just develop ideas that I can maybe use for later photos. And I think that practicing of your craft is key, even if it's just with your smartphone, even if you know the photos. You're like, why am I spending all this effort on a low resolution photo I'll never be able to use? Well, it's still training my eyes. It's still training my brain to see things a certain way and look out for certain subjects. And so we see the histogram here. I've pushed it actually much darker, got rid of some of the highlights in the clouds there, and just really focused on those darker tones of the image. This is a hosta. This is taking my backyard. I was out doing yard work one day. And so this is, I don't know, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. So not the best lighting, but it just the light hitting these was creating some nice edge light on these, on the leaves of the aloe, or the hosta, sorry. And again, I'm out there. I don't have my SLR and tripod and all that good stuff. It's all in the house. But I have my smartphone on me. So just pull that out, snap the quick picture. Actually, this one I think I took in monochrome. On the iPhones, there's different filters you can apply. I'm sure Android has the same. And I like this noir, black and white noir settings, like real high contrast, very dark black and white. So I just switch it to that and take the image. And, you know, had I not taken the image, I probably would have forgotten all about this scene. And it's right here in my yard, someplace I can easily revisit. But, you know, later I'm looking for something on my phone. I'm going through my photo roll, camera roll on my phone. And I come across this picture. It's like, oh, I've forgotten all about that. I took the other day. And I'm like, that was really nice. Like that, you know, that I really like that composition. And, you know, maybe I should go out there someday. These hostas are right in my own yard. I could, you know, take photos of them whenever I want. And so I'm like, well, let me grab my camera, my SLR and my filters and all my good accoutrements and try to go out around the same time of day so I get the same kind of lighting. And I went back out. And so at this point, it's maybe a week or two later, and my hostas had been ravaged by some type of insect. There was holes all over them. They were a little brown in some places. And so I missed the opportunity, right? And so this is a case where you got to take the time to revisit those locations that you like, because they're going to change, especially when they're out in nature, and you might lose the opportunity. But I still have this image, this iPhone image, and it's still something I can look at and say, you know, I have to remind myself, you know, it's a good reminder every time I come across it in my camera library, that if I'm out and I see hostas, hey, like I took that cool black and white that one time. And if I happen to have my good camera with me, I, you know, capture a better high resolution image. This is a giant aloe plant at a gardens. And I've really closed in on this so you can't appreciate the scale of this, but each of those leaves is probably about 3 feet long. It's a really monstrous plant, but it has some really great light coming in from the windows. It's in this arboretum. And so this is the image I captured. This is actually the final processed color image. And I've submitted this to galleries and stuff like that. And so I'm happy with this as a color image. And so again, one day, maybe some bad stormy day, I said, well, why not, if I like it so much as a color image, and it's really about lights and some shadows, about some lines and shapes, you know, maybe that would work well as a monochrome. And so, you know, pull it up in Lightroom. And again, this is a fully processed, ready to print color image. And so in Lightroom, I click the little black and white conversion button, and this is what I get. And I think this is where a lot of beginner photographers get stuck, is they take a nice image, it looks really good in color, maybe they've processed it a bit, and then they click that black and white conversion, and they get this drab, gray, middle gray image. And I think they get frustrated. They go, what happened? I already processed the image. Why doesn't it immediately convert over to a great, awesome black and white image? Well, you have to reprocess it because things just look different. And the computer, when you just click the grayscale button, it's just going to give you this middle gray, right? It doesn't know you want high contrast, good whites, good blacks. It just puts it right in the middle. So even though the color image is fully processed, ready to go, the black and white one, you have to go through the processing all over again. So here's the final processing I did on that one. So I didn't have the colors and the color gradations on the leaves to help me. So I had to use a lot more light and shadow and contrast to bring back some of that dynamic range and make it look more impactful. Now this one, of course, it doesn't have the cheeriness of the color one with the greens. We lose a little bit of that. And so it definitely has a different kind of tone to it. But I've had to, you know, do a lot of work to get a successful monochrome image. So if we look at these three side by side, you can see the color one versus the final monochrome one. They're both very impactful, but it took a bit of work to do that. You can see from the grayscale conversion there on the lower left, what I did to kind of darken some of the areas and brighten some other areas. So if we look at the histograms, you can kind of see how this kind of came to be. So the color one, this was what the photography books would call a good histogram, because all your mountainscapes are all there in the middle. You're not clipping on the high end on the right or the low end on the left. So when we do the grayscale conversion, I basically take away the color channels, and I'm left with pretty much the same histogram there. Maybe did a slight modifications to it. But then we see the final one, you can see all the work I've done. I've pushed that histogram to the left, create a lot more contrast, start to clip some of the shadows, so the blacks in the corners and behind the leaves, which is okay. In monochrome images, a lot of times we can get away with clipping highlights and clipping shadows. You can't, it's a little harder with color because you tend to start, your color channels start getting weird and the colors start looking a little radioactive. So it's a little more difficult, but in black and white, we have a lot more leeway to kind of push the limits of our exposure. So as I'm thinking about, lights and shadows, I'm always just looking at clouds, something simple. And this is, not really a picture of anything per se. It's just, I'm just studying the interface between the whites and the darks and the shades of gray in between, and just trying to arrange them into a pleasing composition. But this is just another way to train my eyes to see in that grayscale. So high key, I was just mentioning about how you can kind of push the limits a bit with monochrome. So these laughing gulls are in this little pond, and the sun's coming up behind them, and so they're in complete shadow. And so if I had exposed correctly for the pond and for the background, they would just be pure silhouettes. But that's not what I was looking for this image. And so I exposed for their chest for that shadow, but that means that everything else then in the background gets overexposed. So again, in a color image, that might look kind of strange, but in monochrome, it just goes to this pure white. And so it's a little bit more about the shape of the birds, and it works for this particular type of bird. And then we have a few little sticks there on the left just to give you a little bit of sense of place of where they're at. That I didn't just manufacture these birds. It's actually really out in nature. But I don't need all that background. I don't need all that other stuff because it's all about the two birds. And then one's lifted up a leg. He thinks he's a flamingo or something. So high key, where we're intentionally overexposing parts of the image and blurring out those parts is one dramatic way. And if we look at the histogram for this, we'd see it's a bunch of different shades of gray and a little bit of black, actually clipping the black there a little bit. But then the white's totally blown out. My histogram just skyrockets off the page there on the right, which tells me I have no detail in the background. It's just pure white. But that's okay for this type of image. So then you can do the opposite. You can really push things to the left side of the histogram, make things really dark. So here I'm in an old factory, and down in the basement, there's not a lot of light. And I like this wrench I found. So I positioned it on the table. And originally my thought was, well, let's clear out all that clutter out of the background. But then I was like, no, that would make it look too sparse. I wanted to make look more realistic. So I was like, well, let me leave the clutter there, but I'll just let it hide into the shadows and just really want to expose for the wrench. So I was like, well, how can I do that and make the dark without having to do tons of post-processing? So the image was pretty low light to begin with. And so I just took my flashlight and just dangled it above the wrench to create a little spotlight on the wrench. And so I could expose for that. And then that meant everything else will be underexposed in the background. And so you can kind of see some of the clutter back there and see some of the other gears and stuff like that. But it hides that in the background, so it keeps my focus on the wrench. And I've also used a tilt shift lens here too to kind of play with my depth of field and sharp point of sharpness, kind of put a little off center. So we see the histogram here, kind of opposite of those birds. Everything's just pushed to the left, just lots of blacks and dark grays in this image and very little midtones or bright whites. So then as I have these kind of ideas in my head of, well, I can use bright whites, I can use dark blacks. So then I'm just on the lookout for where I can find other scenes like this. So here I am in a workshop, and there's window light coming in, and I want to expose for the forms that would be in silhouette if I properly exposed. But if I expose for those shadows, that means the window blows out and I get very strong highlights on the edges of the forms there, which I felt helped kind of outline them and distinguish the different shapes there. So this one's all about shapes. kind of line and form and just kind of light versus dark. I don't need color to tell me what this is and what's going on. It's more of just a graphic type image. So I've been mentioning line and form a little bit as we've been talking about light and shadow. So Elliot Urwitz, one of my favorite photographers, he says, color is descriptive, black and white is interpretive. And we've already kind of seen that here where when we take away color, we have to kind of use some of these other elements to define things. So when you're out and about and you find things that are high on shape and structure, and you don't really need the color to tell what it is, that's a great candidate for a monochrome image. So look for those things that have sharp edges, strong lines, images where the color doesn't really add anything to the image to begin with, or maybe it's already kind of a monochrome image to start with. A lot of times cityscapes and landscapes are like that because it's just about the shapes, and you don't necessarily need the brown hill, the brown mountain, or the gray building. You don't need the color there. So here I am in St. Louis, the famous arch, and if you've been there, it's just this silver panels to it, and it reflects some of the color that's around it. There's some water there and some trees and stuff like that. On the day I was there, it was very, very overcast, so the panels weren't really reflecting any kind of color. There wasn't any kind of gleam to them from the sun. So I said, well, okay, I can't take those wonderful color photos that many people have taken, so let me just focus on the shape and try to come up with more obscure angle, just get right up against it, to kind of see that arch kind of going up and away. And so I knew right away that there wasn't much color in this image to begin with, so I would just make this a monochrome image, and let's not deal with color at all. I don't need to see some of the oranges or something reflected in some of these panels, and just keep it to a graphic image. Here I'm back at the gardens, and this little white, I think it's called white paintbrush, little plant. I was immediately captivated by these yellow round petals, and the nice curves kind of going on in there. And I like this little S curve going through the middle. Then they have these white little frills. And so this is what I saw it in color. So I envisioned the final image to be. And so just filled the frame with this plant and just all these curves going everywhere. But then one day I was looking through my archives and saying, oh, that one's about lines and shapes, and would that make an interesting monochrome image? So convert it to monochrome. Now again, with the kind of like the aloe, without the green and the greens transition to yellows, I kind of have to use the light and shadows to kind of show some of that gradation a little bit more. So I had to emphasize that with my post-processing. But it really allows those little white frills to jump out on the edges of them. So you get a kind of different emphasis, I feel, on the monochrome one. So what do people think? You like the color one better or the monochrome version better?
Well, I gotta say, I like the monochrome just because it pulls out more details in the petals or leaves, whatever they would be.
Okay.
But,
I agree with that. I mean, I think your tones just kind of showcase the plant much better than the color.
All right. Anyone out there prefer the color one?
We got one, Jane Hurst thinks they are both wonderful.
Okay. So I'm kind of partial to the color because that's how I originally envisioned this print to be. But when I asked this at these presentations, it's about 65% of the people prefer the monochrome one over the color. And some people are on the fence and they like both. So this is a good example of, you don't want to kind of pigeonhole yourself. When you see an image and you're really captivated by the color, that doesn't mean that you can't make a successful monochrome image. And maybe the monochrome might surprise you and be better than you originally envisioned. And so this is the case here, where I was just never thought of making this a monochrome, even though it abides by all these kinds of rules I've just been telling you about lines and shapes and shadows and light. But I had my blinders on. I said, no, this is a color image. That's what I want it to be. And so it wasn't until I created this one and started including this in this presentation that I was like, maybe all these people at the Camera Club have something I didn't think about. They're all gravitating. A lot of them are gravitating towards the monochrome one. So yeah, so this is one, could go either way. And yeah, I agree with you all that, the black and white does bring out a lot of the best parts of the image. So I'm always still partial to the color. But again, that's me. I got to get these blinders off and be more open to looking at things in different ways sometimes.
Greg, on that one, I think I tend to like the color better because it's softer. And I've noticed that when you've converted your images to black and white, you often bring the tones down to a very dark. I think in this case, if the tones were a little bit lighter, if it was exposed a little higher, it would bring out that hairy edge of those, don't you think? And I think I'd like the black and white one better in that case.
Yeah. So the images I've shown so far definitely kind of higher contrast, and we'll see a different version, some lighter contrast photos coming up here. But yeah, I felt for this one to really bring out those white frills, I wanted to make the leaves much darker. So I kind of darkened it out to create that contrast more. So I felt if I kept it more of a gray scale or a lighter gray, then the white little frills wouldn't jump out as much. Without that. But yes, it definitely gives you a different feel to it and darker feel. So here, trip to Hawaii with my family, and I just love this kind of straggler vine kind of wrapping around this tree. And I'm at some gardens and there's fence up, so I can't get any closer to it. And I like this composition, but what always annoyed me about this image, and this is right out of the camera, I haven't processed this one, but what always annoyed me about this image is that green plant down there in the lower left. And I tried to clone it out, and I don't know, maybe nowadays with the content aware fills got much smarter, maybe I'd do better. But a couple years ago, whenever I had this image, I just couldn't clone out those green leaves. And if I wasn't at a garden with fences and stuff like that, I would just go up to it and just carefully push the greenery out of the way, take my image, and then push the greenery back into place. But I didn't have that option because I was at this garden, there's a fence, I couldn't do that. So I'm stuck. And like I said, I couldn't clone it out. And I was like, yeah, my eye just really gravitates to that green there down in the bottom. So I said, well, if this is really about the kind of lines and the intertangle of everything, I don't need the color. Why don't I go to monochrome? And so here again, we're going a little darker contrast. But with the monochrome, those leaves just kind of disappear into shadows there of the corner. And then also the monochrome, I can play with those whites and blacks a lot more, and then brings out a lot more of the, you can see a lot more of the different vines and the different layers of vines. There's some skinny ones and fat ones. So I feel the black and white allowed me to really bring out the best parts of this image that I really wanted to focus on. Here, this is it. Glacier National Park in Montana. And oh, by the way, I a lot of times I call out where these photos are, just to show you. A lot of these are right here in the United States. A lot of these not too far from us. You don't have to go to a lot of extravagant locations, although there's a few extravagant locations in here. But you don't have to go very far to find interesting images. That's why I try to call out where things are taken. So this is in Glacier, walking along the trail. I saw this little cluster of ferns, and I kind of like that leaf photo we saw earlier. Just everything's kind of piled on top of each other. And in my eyes and in my brain, I saw something much more interesting than what the camera captured. The camera kind of compressed everything. The greens are just all on top of each other. You kind of lose distinction between the different layers of fern. The depth is really lost. There's a lot of leaf litter under there. You can see those kind of white spots. I couldn't really get to that to clear that out. Or maybe I just didn't have the time, I guess, because my family was with me and they're waiting for me to take yet another photo. And so, I was kind of disappointed that I took this image. What I saw though was not what the camera captured. So, looking at this photo on the computer, I said, well, how can I, create more depth? And as I tried to create more depth with lights and darks and kind of dodging and burning parts of the image, the greens just started going radioactive on me, just unnatural looking colors. I just couldn't manipulate them the way I wanted to. So then I said, well, maybe monochrome might be a solution. As I mentioned, with monochrome, I have a lot more leeway in some of my processing. So I went to monochrome, and then I was able to dodge and burn and kind of brighten up some of the leaves, make them a little whiter, so it created a little bit more depth. I was able to darken some of those shadows, and some of that leaf litter that I didn't like kind of hides into the background. So a little bit of extra work on this one, but that black and white conversion allowed me to create that depth that I'd seen with my eyes, but just couldn't capture quite with my camera. Out and about, and this is something in West Virginia. We're actually out there for fall colors. So again, I have my blinders on, looking for bright, vibrant fall colors, the reds and the oranges, and we're photographing trees with that. And I happened to look down at this rock we're standing on, and I was like, wow, that has some nice reds and oranges in it too. And so capture this image, just the abstract of just all the lines and texture and the color. And so, kind of looking at this photo later, I said, well, if it's about texture, we got some strong lines and shapes, maybe I don't need the color for this one. I can go to monochrome, and kind of went really heavy-handed on this one. And it didn't come out the way I envisioned. I looked at this one, I said, well, it's got a lot of the elements that should make it an interesting black and white. But this is one where I think I needed the color. That little bit of color just helps create another little definition and distinction between the different rocks. And it's lost when we go to monochrome. So even though it's not necessarily a bad photo in monochrome, it's just not the best way for this particular, to present this particular subject. So this is a case where, I saw something, and the parts that I like the most, in this case, the color, it had to stay the color, because in monochrome, I lose that. White Sands, New Mexico, and I been to White Sands, of course, the white sand, not a lot of color to the scene to begin with, other than the blue sky. These little awning picnic tables were just a silver color. But then I had these trash cans, and they had like this bright red top on them. And then the grills were like this rusty brown. And they're really distracting. They're kind of pulling my attention to those. And I didn't want people to focus on those. And then the blue background, the blue sky, very vibrant, kind of popped out. And I said, well, it's more about these three picnic tables, kind of the shape and the light on them. And so going to monochrome, I can get rid of those distracting colors that I didn't like. And I can play with the texture and the light on these picnic tables, really make them pop out of the screen a bit more. So this one, monochrome, I think there's a couple different things going on that just made this better in monochrome. And a lot of the image was kind of monochrome to start with, to begin with. So I'm always out looking for graphic shapes. So this is in Chicago, just walking around in some utility boxes. And had a kind of a little interesting light kind of reflected on them there on the image on the left. But I kind of saw it as a monochrome image. And this is not, award-winning image. I'm not going to submit this to some gallery for some exhibit. It's another example of just kind of training my eyes to be on the lookout for things, and then playing with it with some simple processing just to see what kind of monochrome image I can get. And then I keep these ideas kind of in my mind for later when I see these kind of pipes or lines like this, or a juxtaposition of the big rectangles with the lines and the curves of some of those pipes. So I just kind of keep these ideas going. But it's that effort of taking the picture, then processing the picture, keeping in my archive so I come across it when I'm looking for other images, to just keep that in my Rolodex of image ideas, I guess. Similar to this one, at some sort of theater, and the janitor went into the closet to get out some more chairs. And he opens the door, and here's his stacked metal chairs. And this one's actually really old image. It's taken with an iPhone 4 or something like that. So the image quality is horrendous. But that wasn't the point, right? I saw it. I said, wow, look at that. I like the kind of lattice work, the overlapping of those lines. I like the strong light coming in from the right, and we have some shadows. So again, I'll forget. If I just say, oh, that's interesting, 5 minutes later, I'll forget and never remember. But if I take the photo, convert it to black and white, keep it on my camera roll, I'll come across it again. And I'll go, oh yeah, remember those stacked chairs? I have to keep an eye out for something similar to that. This photo, horrible quality. Never will do anything with it except for this presentation. So here I am back in Chicago, and here's a building. Now, it's not exactly the same. I don't have the curves, but I have that lattice with the strong light and the dark versus the light. And so again, in my subconscious, I'm kind of going through my mind of what kind of things can I take photos of. And I see this building is very plain building, just this kind of off-white brickwork. The windows are just black. And I'm on this architecture boat cruise with my family. Of course, they didn't want the sunrise cruise with the beautiful light. They wanted the 11:30 cruise that allowed them to sleep in and have a nice big breakfast. So I don't have the best light, but I get this bright kind of spotlight there on the middle. But I'm kind of thinking back to those chairs. I'm like, yeah, that might kind of work out though. And so take this image, just kind of fill the frame, I guess, with these shapes, and I have the lights versus the darks. And so just a very abstract kind of graphic image. So anyway, so I took that idea and then I was able to pull it forward into an image that I could be happy with. It was taken with an SLR and a higher resolution. So waiting for my sushi order at my local restaurant, and they had this bookcase with just these different soy sauce bottles in them. And so this bottle is only just a couple inches tall. And I just really like the curves of it. The kind of lines that I like, the kind of stark white, but it's against this brown bookcase, and I didn't really care for the brown. I really just like the shape of the bottle and the little reflection there in the glass shelf. So I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. What can I, how would I process that? And again, just have my smartphone with me. So take the shot and say, well, what if I, just made this a monochrome so I could really focus on the shapes. And so go monochrome, get rid of that distracting brown, and then it's really just pops out at you, this very interesting shape of this bottle. Still keep a little bit of the reflection there at the bottom. And so, makes it a little more artsy. And just doing this in a couple minutes while I'm waiting for my to-go order. So here's the one, I guess, exotic location of this presentation. This is in Svalbard, north of Norway in the Arctic Circle. I was there last summer. And so we're walking along the tundra here, and I see this frozen pond here starting to thaw out. And there's some reindeer there in the background. You can see the snow starting to melt off the mountains. And so this is what I saw, right? We're out there, we're taking kind of landscape, these kind of wide shots. And I saw this, and I was like, oh, well, I'll have the kind of zigzaggy line of the pond kind of leads you into the image, into the background. But, the background wasn't all that for me. It was okay. But I see what part of this really caught my attention, and what caught my attention was that lake here in the foreground, and the curve of the zigzagginess of the shoreline, the zigzagginess replicated there in the melting snow and ice in the middle. So I said, well, if those are interesting parts, most interesting parts, how can I emphasize those more? And so as I start to crop in on those interesting parts, I realized, okay, I don't really have a lot of color in this image. I got some browns and some yellows there in the tundra, but not a lot. So it's really not about the color, it's about the shape. So then I'm thinking of some abstract painters that I like that just kind of put swaths of color on a canvas. And so this is the final image came up with. And off the bat, you don't necessarily know immediately what this is. You definitely don't know it's in Svalbard. There's no sense of context now, taking out some of the other geographic elements. But it doesn't have to be representative of the place I'm at. This is just about that zigzaggy curves on the shoreline on the left, replicated in the ice and snow on the right. And so I didn't need color for this image, and I could go black and white, a little heavy-handed with the contrast. I didn't need to see the detail of the shoreline because it's just about the shapes. Car shows, I know squat about cars, but I like looking at them. And photographing them. So here on this car show, if you look really closely, you can see me reflected in the doorknob there. So bright days, probably like 10 o'clock in the morning. So really bright sun on these cars. So from an artistic standpoint, you can't get good shots because it's just very glary. But I said, oh, well, what if I kind of zoom in on this little element? And it's okay if the windows get blown out there in the upper corners, and we get the kind of strong light on the handles, kind of shapes those out against the black car, and then just let that black car just turn those shadows way down, so just jet black. So it's a more artistic image. I don't need to, you kind of know it's car or something. Some car aficionado will tell me what kind of car this is, and I guess it's like a Continental is one of the cars that has the suicide doors like this, with the handles right next to each other. Or you have
Yeah,
someone
I'm
know what
not
kind of car
sure,
this
but
is?
yeah, I have
You
no
know,
idea. I follow cars somewhat, but yeah, the older ones I'm never very good at. So
a car picture. It was a grill and it had the headlights and it had like the emblem, so we knew it was a Ford or whatever. And I showed it to someone and like, oh, that's a 53 Ford, whatever. I was like, well, how do you know it's a 53? He's like, well, in 52, the light looked like this. And then 53 for 1 year, they changed the headlights slightly different. Then 54, they went back to the original headlights. So since it has that unique headlight, I know that's the 53. I was like, yeah, I can't keep up with that.
I can do that
So,
on the old Mustangs because I used to collect some of those, and so I can
gotcha.
tell you 64, 65, 66 till about almost 70 how they changed. But
Okay.
yeah, these cars I'm not real great at.
Same
Yeah.
thing with if you're a Volkswagen aficionado, it was always about the taillights, and you could tell exactly what year it was by the taillights or the headlights. Yeah.
Gotcha. So anyway, but this one, it's not about what kind of car it is, what year it is. It's just kind of these graphic shapes of the doorknobs. And so, this is a great example of you're out and about somewhere, you don't have great light. The owner's car is not going to allow me to erect a giant soft box around this car in the middle of this car show. So I work with the elements that I have. In this case, I have some strong light. So then I kind of lean into that strong light and the strong contrast and just amp it up all the more so in post-processing. Like going to train museums. This is one in Maryland when I used to live there. And train museums, they do all this wonderful job restoring these trains. And then they have the idea that, everyone likes the train wheels to be bright colors, like bright yellows and canary reds and bright reds and stuff like that. And maybe the trains are painted like that for some special holidays and stuff like that. But a normal working train would just be, blacks and grays. So I see this train. I like this big wheel and all these mechanisms, but it's painted this obnoxious yellow color. And I was like, I just don't like that. So I'm like, well, if I go to black and white, I'll get rid of the color and just be a white on black. So this is a case where the color was going to kind of kill the emphasis on shapes that I wanted. So getting rid of that color, I can focus on the shapes, and then just the play of the shapes against the lights and the darks. This is an old piece of machinery at its factory up in Pennsylvania. And so I just like the intersection, kind of thinking back to those train wheels we just saw, where I kind of partial circles. So I like that kind of intersection. And so kind of taking that idea, kind of some bright part of the wheel versus the dark parts, process the image to look like that. So a lot of editing on this one to make the door thing mechanism on the left there, the bolt patterns really pop out, and then darken some of the other elements behind it. So black and white. So we talked about lines and shapes and lights and shadows. Black and white can also set a mood. And Andre Cortez, Hungarian photographer, lived in Paris and New York. One of my all-time favorite photographers. And this quote: "Seeing is not enough. You have to feel what you photograph." And that's where monochrome a lot of times can evoke a lot of mood. We associate monochrome with spooky, scary subjects. People think back to the Hitchcock classic noir movies. A lot of times melancholy, taking away some of those cheery colors, the bright colors, tends to be a little bit more melancholy. We've seen that with some of the heavy processing I've done on some of these images. And then also monochrome kind of harkens back to the days before color film or color digital, and can convey a more nostalgic feeling. So I'm working with this model in her house, and she's got this gorgeous red hair. And so originally I'm thinking color, and we have kind of soft blue curtains there behind her. And so every time I see the color version of this, I'm gravitated towards her red hair and then kind of hand on top of her head. And I'm kind of losing the feeling that I was trying to capture when we were working together. And so I said, well, maybe those colors are kind of distracting in this case. And maybe a monochrome conversion will help regain some of that mood that I was hoping to capture. So here's a case of a little bit more softer treatment with the monochrome. a little more in the mid grays and not so high contrast. So taking away that color of a red hair, focusing more on just the softness of the image. And to me, the color was taking away from what I want, the mood. So this monochrome allows me to focus just on the soft expression she has, the soft light coming in, and I'm not distracted by some of the colors that were in the original image. Then we can do the kind of high contrast darkness. So working with these models, and the one model had this bright tattoo with this iris and bright blues and stuff like that. It was very distracting for me. So going to monochrome, I can kind of downplay that, and now it's a tattoo. And you look at it, you can still kind of tell what it is, but I'm not captivated by the color here. And I have this other model kind of jetting her arm in there, and it's just a lot of weird juxtapositions going on here. Like, what's going on? I propped in so you're not seeing the full image, trying to figure out what's going on here. And so the monochrome, I feel, really plays into that kind of spookiness of what's going on here. Why is this other hand kind of coming in here and grabbing this model in this weird way? This is some storms, clouds over the ocean in the Atlantic, and actually the storm was abating. The storm had been earlier in the week and it was going away. But I kind of want to keep that feeling of those big storm clouds we had and the thunderstorms we had. So going to monochrome, I can take away that we have actually some blue skies start to peek out in the background there, and kind of go higher contrast in the sky and to make them look a little more menacing, with more reminiscent of that dark mood that we had been experiencing in the previous days.
Greg, we got a question. Do you ever select the subject and leave it in color while taking a distracting background and making it monochrome?
I do, and I'll show some examples of that towards the end of the presentation. Okay,
great.
Yep, I definitely do that sometimes. So we'll talk about nostalgic feelings. So this is in Maryland. There's a photography trip the railroad put on where they had their workers kind of dress up in period clothing. We'd stop along the railways a couple of times to take photos. So I asked this gentleman if he could just stand here next to the tracks. So he kind of looks old. The color one kind of looks old fashioned a little bit, but when I look at it, his dungarees there, they look a little bit more modern. If you look close, you can see his car keys on his keychain there, so it's kind of modern. And so it just doesn't look quite as nostalgic as I wanted to. So going to monochrome, I kind of downplay some of those things, bring out some of the textures a little bit different, the grittiness a little bit more, the lighting on his face play with a little bit more. So I feel the photo on the right looks a little older. Looks like it could have been taken many decades ago, and maybe the one on the left, the color one, looks like someone trying to imitate the past. So I thought monochrome helped kind of play that story of that kind of old-fashioned look that I was going for. This car window had been shot out, and so I'm really captivated by the bullet hole there and the cracks, the pane. There's a little bit of color in the background, but really not that much. Some really strong light on this one. And so I really didn't need the colors. I really wanted the focus to be on those cracks and stuff like that. So getting rid of the colors and going to monochrome can kind of emphasize that texture a bit more. And you can still see all the shapes of the car. You can still see what it is, but I didn't need the colors for this one. And I thought the black and white also kind of played into that mood of this kind of shattered window. This back to this factory, same one I took the wrench at. This is the outside of the building, a couple different types of brick, and this factory is from the turn of the last century. And so as much as I could do in post-processing, the reds and the greens, I cannot get them to look pleasing to me. They just always look kind of off color. And it's the way they faded, the way they made it, things have been painted once upon a time. It just is looking unnatural to me. So I knew I had to get rid of that color. And so going to monochrome, then it just looks like an old decayed building. And I don't have to focus on those weird reds I was trying so hard to fix. And the monochrome had one other thing that I wasn't expecting. You can see in the photo on the left, the wood stairs, once upon a time, probably had a wood railing. that had broken down, and then for safety reasons, they put this more modern pipes in, and that kind of concerned me that it wasn't all wooden and all original. But then going to monochrome, where I'm focusing a little bit more on the shapes and the lines, the little highlights on that pipe railing actually worked out a lot better, and kind of helped lead me up the stairs a little bit, and just kind of blended in much better with the image than on the left there. And you see I also cloned out one of the piece of pipe there. So color, we see in color all the time. Everything around us is in color. So black and white is therefore immediately an interpretation of the world rather than a copy. So we've already talked about this a couple times. I'll just show a few more examples. So we're out and we see an image where color is actually distracting. And our eyes are drawn to those colors instead of to our subjects. We've seen that a couple times. Going to monochrome, we can kind of hide those colors into the background. So here I'm at Washington, D.C., and I asked this protester if I could take a picture of him. He had such a nice beard and a nice smile. So he strikes this pose for me, and he had all his signs and stuff around him, and I cropped in as best I could on it, but there's just still so much red, and your eye is pulled to the color red in particular. And so whenever I look at the color one, my eye goes to his hat. It goes to the letters on the upper right there, and even to the red on the buttons and the American flag. And so it's going all the places I don't want you to go, which is his hand and his face. And so I said, how can I get rid of those distractions of those red? And so going to monochrome, I can get rid of those distracting colors. And then our eye is captivated more by the brightest parts of the image and the sharpest parts of the image on his face there. I still see all those supporting elements around it, but it's just not as distracting and pulling my attention away. This is here in Colorado. This is Animas Forks, abandoned mining town up at 11,000 feet. It's a very hard life they had up there, but a lot of structures still up there. It's so high up that not a lot of people go there, so it doesn't get vandalized. So here I'm up inside this house. This is like a 7-shot HDR to get the exposure from the inside to the outside. A lot of times when you do HDRs, the colors can get a little off. And I tried to play with the color on my post-processing to fix the browns there, because that door is looking way too orange. But it was taking a bunch of effort, and I'm kind of lazy sometimes when I get to my processing. And so, but looking at this, I'm like, do I really need the color? You know, you can tell what the trees are. You can tell the mountains. I don't need them to be in color. So going to monochrome, that just emphasized the parts I cared about. And I didn't need color for this. I could still have that dynamic range I wanted. But I thought the black and white also played to that nostalgic feel a bit. You know, this house is probably built to like early 1900s or something like that. This is in Longmont, Colorado, where I live. This is the old sugar mill factory. They took beets and made it into sugar. And so I specifically wanted to get here early in the morning, right before sunrise at the blue hour, to get this wonderful blue color. And I thought that would contrast well with the factory setting. So this is like, 5 in the morning or something like that. And so I positioned myself, and the composition's fine, and I got the blue color that I wanted. But the thing I wasn't anticipating is that all the factory lights would be different color temperatures, different white balances. So you see we got some orange lights, we got greens, so fluorescence. And so it's creating these weird pops of color throughout the image. And I could try to edit it and fix those. That would be pretty challenging, I think. Or maybe I'm just not gifted with that. So I said, well, maybe I'll go to monochrome, and then all the lights will just be lights, and I won't have to worry about the colors. So I go to monochrome, and yeah, it fixed the problem of my light colors and the different white balance, but then it got rid of the blue hour, which is the whole point of the photo. So now it looks like the photo's taken just at nighttime sometime on a long exposure to get the sky bright. So the monochrome fixed one problem, but it created a new one in that I got rid of the whole intention of my photo, the blue hour. So this is one where I'm stuck. I either got to live with the weird colors of the lights and get my blue hour, or I go to monochrome and everyone's going to think it's just a night scene and not my original intention. So this is one where I'm a little stuck. and I can't really decide which one I like. So this one now lives forever in my archive in my Lightroom and never sees the light of day.
Did you ever
But
consider, I'm sure you considered just making certain colors black and white rather than.
you could, and I'll show some examples of that coming up. It's just not really my thing. I've tried it a bit, and there's a couple examples coming up where I thought they came out pretty well. But I think I realized that it's not for me. Other people do some great stuff with it. And like I said, I have a couple examples coming up that are pretty good, but it's just not my thing. And so one thing I've learned as a photographer is, when I first started out, I took pictures of everything, every subject, all the time, went on all kinds of different workshops. And what that caused me is to, one, gather a lot of gear. So I had different lenses for different subject, different software for different processing of different things. And I realized it was a lot. And so I figured, I need to focus down on the things that I like the most. And I'll try different things sometimes. But I realized that the bicolor thing, it's okay, but it's just not for me. So I just don't try it. But yeah, that could be one solution here, to try to take parts of it and kind of selectively and blend the color image and a monochrome image together.
I was thinking a blue and white instead of a black and white.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that might be an option, something. So this one is one I just kind of abandoned. I think I liked how the grain silos and the water tower on the right looked. I didn't like how the smokestack ended up kind of dead center on the picture. But to get those elements on the right, that's kind of how it plays out. And so ultimately, there's a bunch of other things that I did like about the composition. So I just decided not to do that. But that's the idea. You can try different things. This is at Great Falls in Maryland. This is on the Virginia side. If you're from that area, you see lots of pictures of this big rock mass. And so I was there during fall color, or what was supposed to be fall color. So got up really early and drove to Virginia. And this is like 7 o'clock in the morning. I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And it's big dynamic element here in the foreground. And then there's beautiful fall colors in the background. But you can see the fall colors that year weren't particularly great. And this morning it was I didn't think about that early in the morning, you're going to get some kind of steam and stuff coming off the falls and kind of creating this haze. It's really kind of blocked out the color in the background. And then we'd had some storms that week. So the water was all churned up and so had some dark browns in it. And so I envisioned something more grandiose, and it didn't pan out with the way I saw it. But I like the composition. I said, well, what can I do to get rid of some of these things I don't like? So I kind of abandoned the fall color concept and just go to more high contrast monochrome. And so I lose the fall colors, but again, there wasn't really much there to see to begin with. Going to monochrome, I get rid of the browns in the water that I didn't like. And then I can just focus on this big, commanding rock face here in the middle of the falls, and then the long exposure and flowing water all around it. This is Carey Furnace up in Pittsburgh. Place, it's a lot of character to it, a lot of rust. There's graffiti all over the place. And so the image on the left, I mean, it's busy. It's a very busy image, and it's got a lot going on. And even for me, I don't mind busy images, but it was a lot. So I said, how can I take away a few of the elements so it's maybe a little less chaotic, a little easier on the eyes? And so going to monochrome, in this case, a sepia, depending on how you like to pronounce it, kind of downplayed some of that graffiti. I lost some of that nice rusty color that I liked in the color image, but allowed me just to focus on really the machinery. You can still see there's rust and graffiti, but it's more secondary in the monochrome. It kind of hides it away a little bit. And we're focused on just some of the shapes and less so on the explosion of color in the color image. So people have been talking about bicolor images. We'll get to some here. So variations on a theme. And I love this quote from Paul Dermy, as an author from the early 1900s. To make continuous discoveries in the visual world, one need only look with eyes whose retinas with each blink become virgin again. So I have one of my old SLRs. I converted it to see infrared spectrum. So this is where they take apart the camera and take out the infrared blocking filter and put in an infrared passing filter and then put a color blocking filter in. So here I'm at these train tracks. And one disclaimer, although it looks like I'm standing on the train tracks, I am not. There's actually another curve in the train tracks, and I'm standing safely 20 feet off the tracks, but I zoomed in to give this appearance that I'm right on top of the track. So never, never, never stand on top of train tracks, especially active train tracks like these are. Always dangerous. So I am safely off to the side, and I'm just giving you a false perspective here. So anyway, one disclaimer. So this one, I love the curves of these tracks, but the rocks were kind of browns and reds, and then the trees were just all green, and there was just, everything was very dark. And so the color image, it just wasn't working. So I said, well, what if I went to infrared? All those green trees would become these whites and pinks, going to black and white. Can you all still hear me?
Yep. You're okay so far. Oh, now we lost your sound. Yeah, we still can't hear you.
Greg, you might have to disconnect the AirPods from the Bluetooth.
Yeah, we can't hear you. Can you hear us?
We can read. We can't read lips, or I can't read
Yeah.
lips.
You love that when things go bonkers.
You know, maybe it's an easy fix on turning on the mic. I don't know. Maybe he might be on mute. I don't know.
No, he's not on mute. I don't think he can hear us either. So
I'm wondering, will he have to, get out and come back in? Maybe do a restart.
no, if he just needs to reset his where you can you hear us at all, Greg?
Someone put up a sign. We can't hear you.
Nod,
Yeah.
nod your head if you can hear us. Now you're
Let's see
muted.
if yeah, we still don't hear you.
All right, am I back?
Hey,
Yeah,
welcome
now
back.
you're back.
I hear typing. I don't know. My AirPods were fully charged. I don't know why they died on me. And then why it didn't immediately just switch over to my computer audio.
Yeah. I hate it when it doesn't switch like that. I've got to go through all sorts of gyrations to switch my microphones out. So
So it looks like what I did is I went back to the Zoom and I went to the microphone icon and said switch to a different audio.
Yeah.
As I clicked on computer, it brought me back. Well, sorry for that brief interruption.
no problem.
All right, so let's get back to it. Yes, infrared. So another way to give you a different way to see in monochrome. And then we start to change the colors of things. So here's an early example of kind of a classic thing of finding someone with an interesting umbrella. This is in New York, and taking away all the color except for the umbrella. So, this is early on. This is many, many years ago.
And kind of cliche because everyone's kind of done this, but I'll still try it. I'm first starting out to kind of get a habit, get an idea of how to do it. But then later on, at this collection of cars, and this is a HDR, and it was monochrome originally, and everything was kind of blended together. It felt like it needed a little something more. So here's a case where I brought back some of the green. So these May apple trees would pop out of here in the foreground because I thought those were interesting. So it's just a different way to play. You kind of get bored or stale of doing the same thing, and then you try these different things with adding color back in. So this is
I like that approach. That on that picture, that works sort of nice.
Thanks. Yeah, so this one was processed with Silver Effects Pro, made by DxO, and they have you convert to monochrome, and then you can selectively bring back colors. So that's what I use to do that.
Oh.
So you could do it. You could do something in Photoshop too, or anyway. But yeah, that's how I did it. So this one, back to this factory. In color, there was some paint stains on the ground I didn't like, and I didn't want, it was going to be hard to clone them out. There's some red fire buckets in the background that I didn't want popping out so much. So I originally envisioned this as a monochrome, but when I went to pure monochrome, the machinery just all kind of blended together. And I realized that the light on it was not enough to just bring out distinction between these machines here. So I selectively, again with Silver Effects Pro, brought back some of the reds and some of the oranges just in the machinery, just to help create some distinction there. So at first glance, you say, oh, it's a color image. I see a bunch of different colors. But if you look at the background, you look at the floor, that's all black and white. I'm taking all the color out there. So I have done some of this bicolor stuff. As I said before, it's just not my thing, I guess. Like, it worked okay for this image, but it's just not something I typically gravitate towards, I guess. So working with that red-haired model I mentioned before. So she's on the ground. I'm standing over top of her, telling her I promise not to drop my camera on her head. And so she has gorgeous red hair, but in color, we had the wood color of the floor was contrasting with her hair. And then, of course, we had her skin tone. I really wanted to just be this flaming red hair. So converting this to monochrome and then selectively just bringing back the color in her hair, get this kind of flaming red hair look that I was going for. And that's all I have for you folks.
Great.
Open up for more questions.
I know we had one person ask if you could show how you process it, the color image into black and white. I don't know if that's something you could do, or that would be too.
Sure. I mean, we could run through something. Let me see what I can find.
I know that's a tough one to throw on somebody in this spur of the moment.
That's fine. Let's see. Let me go here to monochrome to try to find something recent. Working on a lot of. Go ahead.
Do you do most of your processing just in Lightroom?
Yeah, in Lightroom. So here, we'll take this one here. Let me bring it back here. So I used to use Silver Effects Pro a lot for monochrome stuff, but Lightroom has come a long way. I don't really use Photoshop at all. I only use that for my composites when I'm doing light painting at night. So here's the case. We'll see. Here's the original of this one. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Oh, it's still not grabbing the right one. Let's see. Oh, this is a copy, but this is not. So if we look at the development for this one, we go back to. Oh, there you go. There's the original color. So you can see the color now that I have all the transitions into it. You can see it kind of looks a little garish. But usually what I'll do is first thing is I just go to black and white just to see what a grayscale conversion looks like. And then my process, I usually just work kind of top to bottom on my palette here on the right. But the key is I revisit. So I'll start with, typical exposure contrast. So in this case, highlights brought them way down. This is in Greece, by the way. This is Apollo's temple in Olympia, I think, or Corinth. Sorry, Corinth. We just did a family trip there over the Christmas holidays. So in this case, I'm not there at the optimal time. There with my family. This is probably like 1:30 in the afternoon or something. We can see when it was. Oh, it was before lunch, 11, almost noon. So I'm there. So not the best lighting, but I'm taking these photos for our little family album. So knock down the highlights, bring up the shadow details. Once I went to black and white, that's when I really start stretching the whites and the blacks. So went down a good bit with the blacks. If you see with like the whites, if this is at 48, if I go without it, see, it kind of looks a little bland. So then I really start punching those whites up. But these are all global changes I'm making, right? It's affecting the whole image. Texture I didn't play with. Clarity I'll use a lot with monochrome images. This dehaze slider, it's really nice. It's meant for you have haze in your photo, but it actually works for a lot of other things. So in this case, if we took that away, it just creates a little bit more punch. Even though I didn't really have haze to deal with, you can see it just adds some additional drama into the photo. Then I'll go down to the tone curve, and I'll usually do this manually. Lightroom has some presets in there. Sometimes I use this as a starting point, but usually I'll just put a point here in the middle, and I'll kind of play with the middle a little bit. And then I'll start putting some points in the shadows and then in the highlights. This usually creating some type of S curve, but not, this one is a very subtle S curve. Then I'll go down here to the black and white panel. So this is the panel people forget about. I find a lot in Lightroom. Allows me to play with the individual color channels and basically affect the luminosity, the contrast of those. So you see, I'll play with a lot of those colors. And when you first convert it, it might tweak some of these sliders a little bit for you, just the Lightroom algorithms, but I'll play with a lot more. So if we go back to the original image, it had oranges and yellows in it, and then of course the blue of the sky, not a little bit of green maybe, but not too many others. So you see I played a lot with those yellow and orange channels, pushed those down to make those darker. Brought down the green, which brought down the grass there in the foreground, and then brought down the blue aqua a little bit to put a little bit more contrast in the sky. Don't use play with color grading, then detail. If I'll play with that, this looks like you use just the standard for this one. And then I'll go back up to the top and go back through basic panel and then maybe make some additional tweaks. If I need to make more localized adjustments, I'll use the brush tool here or put a gradient. Looks like I didn't do that for this particular image. Does that answer kind of question, or does people have more questions?
Yeah, probably that gave them a good idea. It's always interesting to see how somebody approaches how they convert to black and white, because everybody has a different technique.
Yeah, let me see what else I have here.
Do you do all your work in Lightroom, or what percentage do you do in Photoshop?
I do 0% in Photoshop. As I mentioned in the beginning, I only use Photoshop when I'm compositing multiple photos, like when I'm doing a light painting. So I don't use Photoshop. I use Lightroom. I never learned Photoshop early on. And by the time I got experienced enough to do a lot more editing, Lightroom had come such a long way that Lightroom does what I need it to do. I know Photoshop has some better, cloning tools, and so you can do Gaussian blurs and some of these other things, but I can do a lot of that with the masking now that came out with Lightroom a couple years ago. So I'll do mask. I was trying to find another photo maybe where I have done a lot more masking. I'm not finding one at the moment. I'm trying to do a lot with the nude models, so I was trying not to show any of those. Let me see if I can find one more. No masking on that one.
Isn't it funny when you want to find one with masking, you can't
Yeah,
find
I'm
it?
trying to think like what was something I know like with the models I have, but I don't want to show nudes. I don't know how people feel about that, so we'll skip past all those. Yeah, no masking on this one either. Interesting. Yeah, so that's kind of really just my process, kind of top down and then always revisit, and then don't forget about the black and white channel. Like in this one, I didn't play with it at all. Didn't really need to. There wasn't a lot of color in
Yeah.
this to begin with, right? It's pretty black and white. This is in Hawaii. These uh they're not some type of banyan tree or something like that, but these roots kind of gray to begin with. It was against black rocks. There wasn't a lot of color to deal with in that image to begin with. So
Yeah, that black and white section really helps for adjusting individual shades of gray from the different colors. So
right.
Yeah, I find the Silver Pro handy when I have an image I just can't seem to work in Lightroom. And if I want some more dramatic type of to an image that I think would be in black and white, I go to Silver Pro and play with those a little bit over there. So that's
Yeah,
just
I find Silver FX Pro is really good with images that have very fine details that I'm trying to bring out. So it just has a lot more sliders and stuff for me to work with. So if something's really highly detailed, I'll bring it over to Silver FX Pro. But I don't use Photoshop, so I don't use smart layers. So problem with that is I go into Silver FX Pro and then it exports as a TIFF, which is everything's locked in. So if I try to go re-edit, then I have to start back all over. So if I can do it all in Lightroom, I prefer that because then I can constantly continue to tweak in Lightroom. Someone says, do you ever use LUTs in the basic tab in Lightroom, 4 squares? I'm not sure what LUT they're talking about.
yeah, that's where you had Adobe monochrome and all that. The color presets, you can also bring in LUTs into that section.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried some of the presets and stuff like that, but for me, I like the editing process. I mentioned in part of my presentation that sometimes I'm a lazy editor and don't use all the tools. But I try not to use too many. Like sometimes if I go to Silver FX Pro, I'll start with a preset and then just to get me started. But I like the process of kind of building on the image and kind of working it. So I don't know. Sometimes I feel like presets does too much of the work for me. So I like to do it myself.
Another question is, do you ever use color tone with monochrome similar to the sepia or other color tones? I noticed too, I was going to ask the same question, that most of yours seem to be straight black and white.
I have used that. Let me see if I find an example. But yeah, I'll do that under the color is now the color mixer. What is it? Color grading selection. Now I will do that. Let's see if I can find see that's a nude woman. We'll skip that one. Yeah, I got a lot of monochromes. But yes, I have used that before. Sometimes I like the blue tone, kind of like the old cyanotype, print photography. So I'll use that and create like a blue tone to it. I'm not finding one at the moment. But yeah, sometimes I do that. But yeah, mostly straight black and white conversions.
Yeah, I know I do a lot of adding toning to it because I come from the old black and white printing days where I printed my own, and none of the black and white papers were ever straight black and white. They always had a tone to them, and then you could also tone them, selenium tone them, or brown tone them in that. So I've always added tones to my monochrome prints, but or a lot of times. Sometimes I go straight too, but
sure.
Anybody else have any other questions? Covered the LUTs. So yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we talked to the software
Yeah.
stuff.
But they're in the same spot. The LUTs are put in the same spot as the some of those Adobe presets in that.
Right.
I think that's it. If there aren't any other questions.
Well, Greg, I just want to say thanks, and I'll see you in a couple weeks back in Omaha when you come and judge our contest there.
All right. All right.
I thought it was I thought it was a fantastic presentation in that on this black and white.
Oh, great. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us. I think everybody, we had quite a few people today. We had a couple people even on YouTube watching today.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay, great.
And you're certainly welcome to stay around for the Q&A that we get into. It always gets to be an interesting conversation. So
Yeah, I have a few minutes, so yeah, I'll stick around for a little bit of it.
Cool.
Okay,
Awesome.
great. I'm just gonna remove the spotlight so we can just go to whoever. So our first question is, are there any problems with the new Mac OS Sonoma operating system with programs that won't work with it? I haven't had any problems with it, and I'm on the very latest version of Sonoma. The only thing I found is some of the old programs, especially if the old programs are 32-bit, won't work. So if they're, if you have something that's 7, 8, 9 years old, especially Photoshop and Lightroom from way back, those won't work on there.
but that's more of a hardware issue, Jeff, than it is Sonoma itself. Because I mean they went to 64-bit.
Yeah, a couple ago, but I had a bunch of programs that stopped working when I did Sonoma that were still
older programs.
working on, what was it, Monterey?
So, I haven't found any myself, but I think
yeah,
overall
every now and then I have some very old programs that stop working when they update. And you just sort of have to keep an eye out and hope that all the programmers keep updating their programs. And most of the time it's programs that I don't use that often anyhow. I think the only favorite one was one that showed where your focus point was in Lightroom. And it was a plugin, and that stopped working on either Monterey or Sonoma because the developers stopped updating it.
Jeffrey, do you shoot Nikon?
No, Marty shoots Canon.
Oh, he's asking you. Yeah, Jeff shoots Nikon. Yeah.
I shoot Nikon, yeah.
Because I shoot Canon, and that's one thing I've been wanting for a long time is to show the focus point. And there's some apps that do it, but it would be nice if Lightroom and Photoshop added that.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever used Canon's Digital Photo Professional, that'll show it in there. That's software that comes when you buy your camera. You can download it right from Canon, but that will show the focus point in it.
Yeah, I wonder why Adobe doesn't add that if it's that easy. I think the manufacturers make it available.
Yeah, I don't know why. It was a nice little program that was just a plugin that you could use, and I'm pretty sure it stopped working. I don't know if I'm just looking to see if I've got it in here yet.
I have one that works, an app that works in Photoshop. Yeah, but to get to each image, it's a pain to go through the menus each time you want to see it on a particular image. It would be nice if there was a button where you could turn that feature on and off.
Yeah.
And I think that I've seen some of the forums for Adobe where a lot of people have asked for that. So maybe it's difficult.
Part of it is that the one that I'm using, which is just called Focus Points, doesn't work with the new Nikon Z8 or any of the Z cameras. So it gets messed up there. So it was nice because it pointed out the exact pattern that the camera was using when it was focusing. And I probably should, I'll have to And he says it's quite new. Well, it's info. His email is info@lightroomfocuspointsplugin.com. So you could check that one out. It might work better on Canon cameras than Nikon cameras. I'm gonna try to bug him to see if I can get him to get it to work again, because it hasn't worked on any of my Z cameras. And that's all I shoot nowadays. And it's nice to see on the old cameras, but yeah, I wish they would do it. I end up going back to my camera, which will show me my focus point. But that's only until I reformat the card.
I agree, Jeff, with you. It would be nice as if they had that in the software. I use On One, and like last night, I was doing band photography. So when I use a flash, it's got the little green box around the eye. So what's cool is I zoom in right there, and I know it's nice and sharp. So when you do download it or upload it, whatever, in your computer, it'd be nice to know exactly where that, where focused.
Yeah.
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 And Clint, I think, because I'm an On1 user too, I think if we put in a suggestion to Dan there, I bet you that might be something to get enough of us to do that. Probably
Yes.
quicker than Adobe would ever get it done.
I agree with you on that. It's a nice feature because, it's like, well, I think it was this picture, but I mean, if you're taking, let's say, several hundred pictures, like you can't remember every single spot you focused on.
No. No, and it is handy. I had a customer yesterday who was having problems with where the camera was focusing, and we were trying to figure out where it focused, but it was an older DSLR, and it was picking 51 points, so it was actually focusing beyond the subject all the time for him. And it would have been nice to be able to go into Lightroom and see exactly where did it focus on, so that whether it's you making the mistake or the camera's doing it. So
Yeah, bingo.
but
In there.
yeah. Now, all you can do is send in to, Lightroom does have a feedback section that you can send in, and it bugs the Adobe guys to do some of that stuff. I know they're more focusing on AI and all the other stuff in Photoshop, but sometimes they listen, not too often. Luminar and Neo might listen a little bit more. But anytime I find a spot that I can contact the developer, you try it. Sometimes you get lucky, and they'll work on that.
Yeah, I did like Marty's suggestion too, like on One, contact them.
Yep.
They're pretty. They seem to be pretty friendly to listening to things. I mean, we've both Clint. I'm sure both Clint and I have both seen already where they've put a feature in and then pulled it out or changed it because they got enough feedback to saying,
Yes.
why did you do that?
Yeah.
And I think because they're smaller, they're nimble enough, they can probably do that a lot easier and quicker than what Adobe is going to do.
Correct.
Yeah.
What's nice is that new AI noise reduction or whatever. Boy, did that make a huge improvement. But it can make the picture softer, but at least it's you don't see a ton of noise in the picture.
Yeah, I don't know about software really, Clint. I haven't found that. Just bringing up here if I can. Shot that I did a couple weeks ago, and when I ran it through that, I was just absolutely amazed at how well it did.
Yeah, the denoise software for all these companies keeps improving,
Yeah,
and lets you shoot a lot higher ISO than you ever used to.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard because about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, my God, I had to do a comedy club. My God, I think a cave would have been brighter. It was so dark in there. I mean, I was shooting sometimes at 40,000 ISO and a shutter of 20. It's like, how am I supposed to work with this?
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
the bar, they didn't even have the lights on for the bar. It's like, how are they supposed to get drinks and mixed drinks? It's so dark.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I
No,
don't-
Or a
I-
headlight.
Yeah, a miner's lamp.
I guess I can show you this on the iPad, although they're pretty low res files on my iPad, but it'll still demonstrate, I guess, enough. Maybe if I can find that name, like
Oh, thank you for trying to show that, Marty.
I got it here. All right, so let me share my screen. All right, where did they move the iPad to? If you're on the latest version of Zoom, they moved screen sharing things around.
yeah, they changed all the screen sharing stuff around again.
I remember where they put it, but anyway, so this little Blue Jay, again on here, this is a pretty low res file because that's what I kind of move over to my iPad. But if I go to here, you can see where I started. So that the one on the left is a crop from that.
Yep.
Wow.
And this is really low res, but then, you know, this, oops, sorry. This, again, because it's low res, it gets a little fuzzy, but it's actually pretty damn sharp when you look at it. To pull that small of an image out of what I had originally was pretty phenomenal. And that new, you're right, the 24 version of the on one's denoise and sharpen is just incredible.
Well, that helps for me is with the low light band photography because it's pretty dark in there, and that really helps out a lot.
Right, right.
Not nighttime. Daytime doesn't seem like there's so much issues, you know, because you got at least more light, except like what you were kind of showing too. You know, if it's dark or if you're zooming, it can help to a certain degree.
Yeah, I think when you're doing that heavy of a crop, because you're gonna gain back noise otherwise, so it's gonna take some of that out. So,
Yeah.
because you know it's maybe more pixelization than noise, but it still helps kind of blend it all. You know, and I think when On1 did this, if you look at most of their examples of it that they show, it's all about wildlife, and that's I think what
Yes.
they're targeting with it.
No, I've used that on one, the new one. I had to manual focus. I flew down by Indianapolis for the total eclipse, solar eclipse, and I had to manual focus, and I didn't quite have the focus quite right in that. You know, it was off a little bit, not as sharp. Well, that noise AI was able to bring that back because, like, I was shocked, like, incredible.
It's been
Yeah.
pretty impressive to play with, right?
Glenn, how was your trip down? I was hearing that, did you fly into Indianapolis?
I flew right outside of Indianapolis. It was fantastic. I mean, there was maybe only 100 airplanes on where I landed. It was there was like a handful of people. It was incredible. So what was really fascinating is I thought it was cool in that it took us 2 hours to fly down there because we had to do the TFR. We had to avoid the TFR, which is the
Temporary flight restrictions, you know.
right restriction because the president was in Madison and also Chicago. So it was 2 hours down, 2 hours back. So what was really nice in that is coming back, when we left, you look down onto the city of Indianapolis, the freeway was a parking lot. It was not moving.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a nightmare. It's like, thank God I'm not in that. So it was really, I was very fortunate, very lucky, and just take a wild guess how much it cost me to go down there. My my friend, it was $104.94. So it's like, well, I gave him 150. I'm like, that was worth it. I mean, 4 hours of, flight. I mean, that's $25 an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, that's cheap.
I'd like to have
Oh,
gone
cheap.
with you.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it was a 6 passenger, but we had my camera equipment on the chair next to me. I brought a tripod or two. I can show you a few pictures if you want. Let me try to find. Let's see here. Let's share screen, I guess. Hang on.
Well, they have
no,
to
it's-
jump off,
it's
but it
nice.
was great talking to you all, and enjoy the rest of your meeting, and hopefully I'll see you again in the future.
Well, thank you
Okay,
very much for
thanks,
coming.
Greg. Thanks a
Fantastic.
lot.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it.
But no, I spent about I'm just making it quick, easy. Let's say it was 4 minutes. So about 2 minutes, I was setting up my camera. I mean, I set it up before that, but I wanted to spend some time actually witnessing it. So I had a wired remote, and that what I should have done, because originally I was shooting with a tripod, and I was just hand clicking using the trigger, and I had it on like 5-second delay. I probably should have changed that off if I was using the remote. Well, for some reason, I can't find, they have a new layout. Well,
That's what I
okay.
said. Now you got it. You're getting it.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So let me go full screen. So that's the moon. That's cool because I could get the sunspot.
Yeah.
So like I said, I was manually focusing, and it wasn't, when you trying to shoot infinity, you get a little range of, how can I say it, of infinity for focusing. So I had a hard time focusing, and you got tiny little screen. So next time I would have probably had it on my tablet so I could try and focus in a little bit better. So that's one of the pictures. This is the next picture, almost about 5 minutes right before the total eclipse. And
How
then
strong of a telly were you using?
I was using a 200 to 600, and when I manual focus, I have my camera set up to zoom in, and it's at 4.5, almost 5 times zoom. So I tried the best I could to zoom in. So this is probably about the best shot I could get from the total eclipse, and it's halfway decent.
Yeah, it's pretty good. You've got some good, what do you call them, the spikes?
Well, yeah, well, they called I thought they were solar flares and that, but when I checked spaceweather.com, some of these they're called red prominence, I think it's pronounced.
I think that's a kind of space flare, isn't it? Sun flare.
Yeah, it's kind of like a sun flare, but they don't really classify it as a sun flare. So I didn't quite understand that. So, but I thought it was really neat to have an opportunity to do that.
I learned a hard lesson in shooting it that day from here. When I was set up and shooting, we got almost 90%, I think, here. When I had to move the camera, of course, I don't have the equipment that moves the camera for like real people who shoot nighttime photography and eclipses. So I had to move the camera myself every couple of minutes, and I shot constantly, and I thought I had enough shots to do a time lapse eventually. But when I actually brought it into Photoshop and started looking at them, I realized that every time I moved the camera, I didn't level it up. And so the angle of the sun was or the eclipse was a little bit different in each photo. And I didn't have a good way. I tried to use the align feature, and I was hoping it would use that sunspot to align them, and it just wouldn't do it. Photoshop will not align them. Okay. And so until I tried aligning them by hand, and some were a little bit bigger than others. I'm not sure why my camera did that. But I know I just gave up on it. It's too much work to try to get a time lapse out of it.
No, it's hard. I'm glad. I was happy 90%. I mean, there's a few things I would change, but not a lot. So what's funny is I didn't buy, a solar filter. So what I made is I made my own. You see, so I have this little made out of
Oh.
cardboard, and it worked out really good. So, and this eyepiece worked out great. It's like, well, if it's supposed to protect your eye, it should protect your sensor. So
I used my ND. I have a 10, a 6, and a 3, and so all three of those together, I had a 19, and it worked fine.
correct. I know people do use that. Supposedly, it's not rated for the ultraviolet and UV
Yeah.
and that, but I do know.
Yeah, it's the infrared bands that can cause problems to the camera. Both the sensor and of the lenses, it can heat up the elements inside the lens.
Yeah, I
if
was
you're-
watching for that. I didn't have any problem, but I
Yeah.
was careful about looking.
And as long as you weren't looking, as long as it wasn't a DSLR and you weren't looking through the viewfinder, you're okay too. It's worse on the human eye, you doing that setup. But if you're on mirrorless, then it doesn't make any difference because you're not getting it through your eye.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah, I
used
had
to-
the same problem as I kept turning the camera to follow the sun. The sun rotated slightly and I had a harder time. I had everything leveled, so that was good. But yeah, every few minutes I had to readjust the camera.
Yeah, and when I was doing it, I wasn't even thinking about I should level it up. I didn't even try. So
Yeah.
I was rotating on each time I moved it, which was every couple
Yeah.
of minutes. So
Yeah,
I
you're
never
right.
realized how high in the sky the sun was going to be. I was figuring it'd be a little lower in the sky, and it was pretty straight up by the time you hit 2 o'clock. I
yeah,
was having a hard time even getting the lens to point that way.
yeah, I saw that coming the weekend before the eclipse. I was up in Hartford and I stopped at Holy Hill coming back, and I went to a spot where on PhotoPills it said that I could see the eclipse above the Holy Hill Cathedral. And I went to that spot and there was no problem getting into the property. And I looked at it and the eclipse was way, way higher up in the sky.
Yeah.
And I would have to have taken a really big zoomed out photo, and the sun would have been tiny. So I didn't even bother driving up there on the day of the eclipse.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
No,
nice.
it was interesting though.
It was
That's for
nice.
sure.
I mean, I'd love to do it again. And I probably, like I said, I wouldn't change it. And it was great because, I mean, I was surprised that more people weren't, let's say from the town and that, although it was a very small little town where I was. But I was surprised that there wasn't really hardly anyone there. Now I know on the world news at Indianapolis Speedway, the place was packed with people. So it was
Yeah.
nice, there wasn't many people around, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, I think the next total eclipse is in 2026. It's going to be in Spain. And I was looking at it, and it's actually about 7 o'clock in the evening. I think it's in August, if I recall. So 7 o'clock in the evening is pretty late in the evening, but good, still high enough. So there might be some, if anyone's wanting to go over there, there might be some good sea shots or something,
Right,
with
it's supposed to go through Ireland too, and Greenland. Is there Iceland?
Iceland. It's
Iceland.
actually going through Greenland. The longest is in the longest time of the totality is in Greenland, but I don't think there's any little towns there on the south side where it's crossing.
Because I do know, and I checked, the two weeks ago or whatever. I know from Chicago to that area is like only 3,000 miles, so it's really not too bad. It's, let's say, going from New York to, let's say, LA. So 3,000 miles, it's not too bad.
For what? What's
From flight. Let's say if you wanted to fly over there, to the Eclipse. It's basically 3,000 miles, so that's not too bad. Now going to Spain would be a little bit more farther than that, because that would be another. I don't know exactly how far
From here?
Well, yeah.
That's-
Well, it'd be easier to get into Spain. I mean, you can fly. I've flown into Madrid quite a few times. And
So then
so,
you would know how long it would take then, for
Yeah.
flying wise.
yeah. And well, I was trying to think of what had the longest totality, but I don't recall off the top of my head. But Iceland, it just barely catches the edge of Iceland. I think the actual center of totality doesn't even hit the edge of Iceland on the
No, we
western
sort of
side.
have to wait like 35 years before we see the next one around here, at least.
Yeah, there's quite a
So-
few. I think there's like
Be dead by
5
then.
of them somewhere in the world in the next
Yeah.
10 years or so.
Yeah, you gotta always travel all over the world to go chase it.
Yeah.
There are more and more people becoming eclipse chasers. That's part of the reason it's so crowded in those areas.
Well, let's say if you go to Spain, just don't make it just, for the eclipse. Go there for checking out all the other, attractions.
Oh, yeah. Of course,
Yeah.
yeah. I love Spain. It's one of my favorite places.
Well, that might have to be on your list then, that's 2
Maybe.
years. August, I think August 12th is the date, if I remember right.
Yeah,
I got a
saved
question for you
several of them.
guys.
Yes.
Off,
Yeah,
off,
go ahead,
off
Steve.
subject here. I'm trying to set up some SSD external drives for my photos library. And I was just wondering what you guys are. I've been on the YouTube looking at all kinds of different things, and the guys are talking about taking the SSD drive and putting it in some kind of encasement type of thing. And I was just wondering if anybody else is doing SSDs for their external drives for their photos.
That's all I use for my external drives.
You mean permanently saving them on SSDs?
Yeah, like, that's where your library is at, your photo library is. Mine are I have it on a Seagate spinning drive, but I was thinking of trying to get all this changed over to just SSD cards. I've never had any issues with these spinning drives, but I guess I'm anticipating I might one of these days. So
How many
and I do all kinds of
terabytes?
backup.
Yeah.
Oh,
How many
well,
terabytes of data do you have?
I got about a little over 5 terabytes on my current stuff. That's just taking me back, maybe 7, 8 years. I got more someplace else, but I haven't looked at those in years. So
Yeah.
but, it gets a little pricey when you get above 2 terabytes.
Yeah, it gets
so.
pricey when you start talking 4 and 5 terabytes. You're up to $500-600 for a drive. Are you a Mac or PC?
I'm a Mac.
You're Mac. Okay. Take a look at OWC.
OWC.
Yeah, macsales.com. They have a bunch of NVMEs, which is the same type of hard drive that are in the laptop computers, or used to be in the laptop computers. They're very fast, and they make them in various sizes, and you can get them up to 8 terabytes, and that will go into an enclosure, and not be much more than about $500 or $600 for like 8 terabytes, I believe.
Okay.
Or you could get a couple smaller ones, and slowly do it.
Yeah, I just wondered, do you guys anybody uses more than one external drive for their photos, or you just stay with one?
I have 4 or 5 that I use.
I
Okay.
use 2 of them regularly, and then I got a third one that at the end of the year, every year, everything gets backed up to a third drive on top of it. So
Yeah.
I
So-
use 5 myself in that, but like I mentioned several times, is all mine is just the disc ones. I only use them for backup, and I don't always have them plugged in. The only time I plug my external hard drive in is when I back it up. And if I do some Photoshop editing, well, technically on one editing, that's the only time I have it plugged in.
I was doing some
Yeah.
video work last week. I haven't done hardly any video work, so I was videoing a conference just for the fun of it. And my goodness, they really take up a whole lot of gigabytes. I'll tell you that much. I was
Yeah.
really surprised how much it was, but so
Yeah.
video, I'm going to have to buy. If I'm going to do any video, I'm going to have to buy another external drive just to handle the video stuff. So
Yeah,
but,
I do video editing on my computer itself or on a separate 1 terabyte SSD drive, and then it all gets moved over to a spinning drive for storage. So for my backups, I do spinning drives. My regular photo storage is still on spinning drives, but it's in a RAID box, so that works better for me that
what
way.
do you use for editing? I haven't done any editing in video whatsoever. I'm going to go out to Teddy Roosevelt in June, and I've been asked to do a presentation when I get back. So I was planning to do some video work, but I've never done any editing to speak of. And I was looking at Kelby 1, and he has something there on Lightroom, but I haven't played with it yet. So
Yeah, Lightroom doesn't really work with videos. You can do it in Photoshop with video editing. I use Final Cut Pro, which is a little more expensive. It would be the upper grade of iMovie that comes with your Mac.
I was going to say, I mean, I've done a little bit with my drone. I've done a little bit of video work. I don't do much of it either, but that's where I've been doing my editing, and just writing in iMovie. Another program to look at for Macs, since you're on a Mac, is look at Pixelmator Pro, because you can do video editing in that, and it's a great photo editor, but it also does video, and it's only I think it's only like a $49 program, but it's
Wow.
a really great program.
I'm assuming there's a big learning curve with this stuff or not?
There definitely is some. Yeah. Drum is shaking her head. Yeah, because I'm sure you have to do enough video stuff for your drone, and yeah.
Yeah, I got quite a few videos that I took a couple months ago, but I've kind of set them aside just because I need to pay for a program that's for real. I think Premiere was really quite expensive. I have the $10 photography account.
Yeah, Premiere would
I
be.
think it
Take a
went
look
up to like
at
$30 or something.
Yeah, take a look at Blackmagic's
Dissolve DaVinci.
DaVinci Resolve. And
it's
that
free.
works. Yeah, it's free for the base version. And then if you want to buy the full version, which you probably wouldn't need, is $300. But DaVinci Resolve really does a nice job at editing. It's a little complex, but you can do just about any editing that you would need on there, and it's free.
Real question, Hubert, is what is your end goal for these videos? I mean, are they, like you used to shoot Super 8 videos, on a film camera, and you didn't do too much editing? Or are you looking to make high production videos out of these?
No, I'm not worried about the high production. I have a Fujifilm. I have an X-T5, and as far as quality, I thought that 4K, and it really turned out nice, just what I shot. But inserting stills or maybe putting some titles in, and of course, taking some stuff out and put that kind of thing like that. But nothing too elaborate. It's just I don't want to get into video too deeply. I just thought it'd be sort of fun to have short clips of video of some of the things I want to be talking about. So
I mean, certainly iMovie, which you already have, is capable of doing all of that.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. I haven't looked into anything basically yet. So,
and I started with basic Photoshop. Photoshop has a complete video editing setup in it with the latest version of Photoshop, so you could do it in there as well. I think Kelby 1 probably has a class on that.
I know he has a class on Lightroom video editing. So.
Yeah, and then there is a little bit of video editing. It's basically using the slideshow module and dropping video in and stills in between.
Okay.
It's pretty rudimentary, but it can be done. And we got on your hard drive stuff, we do have one, JJ Johnson was saying he has a 12 terabyte hard drive connected to his computer. I'm pretty sure that's spinning, and then it's hooked up to a home server unit, and then everything's backed up on Backblaze.
Oh, I'm
Um,
glad he asked. I was just going to ask about Backblaze. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
Yeah,
I've
that's
been
okay.
I've
I
been
have
sitting-
Blackblaze. I have Blackblaze too.
I've been sitting here. I got a trial version the other day, and it says on it the 24th is when I started my backup. I have 8 terabytes, and I've only in 24, today's 20, so 3 days, it's only backed up a half a terabyte. And so I'm thinking that it's going to take more than the 30-day trial to get my
Yes,
drive
it will.
Yeah,
back
well,
up.
It will probably take you 4 to 5 months to back up 8 terabytes.
Oh my
Mhm.
God.
it really does,
So-
but it's worth the money.
Is it?
But it's-
Because I wanted to, once it's backed up, I want to actually check out the restore options and play around with it before I actually put money down.
Well, I can tell you, I don't know if Kathy Brand is on. She
didn't-
lost her whole computer when she was doing an update because she had malware on the computer, and the update completely crashed, and they had to wipe her computer and reinstall the operating system. So she was on Backblaze, and she had another backup that was supposed to be working, but that didn't work. Backblaze worked. They sent her a hard drive, which she got within about a day and a half of ordering it from them. And she's been able to completely restore all her files back to her computer. And then she sends the hard drive back to them, and then they credit her for the price of the
Oh,
hard
wow.
drive. So
Oh,
it
that's
doesn't
great.
cost her any money other than the $7-8 a month that Backblaze cost her. And she'll swear by Backblaze from now on. She said if she wouldn't have had that, she would have lost 175 gigabytes worth of files that were on her main computer. Now, her photo archive was on a separate hard drive, so she didn't lose any of that. But her main computer had all her personal files and all that kind of stuff. And that's what she ended up losing and was
Well-
able to get back.
Well, on my backup, I have occasionally gone in there and had to restore a specific, some of my images got corrupted one time, and I had all these crazy lines in the images, and I just went to the backup and went back a week or two and got them. And so it was real easy for me to go into my backup software on my external drive, which is backed up onto external drive. And so I was wondering when I was reading about Backblaze, if you could go in and do that sort of thing, or if you had to have them send you the whole set of data.
No, you can actually, with Backblaze, you can download specific files, and that you can do right from the website, right from the
Yeah.
browser window, and download that. For her needing all the files, it was faster to get the hard drive.
Got it. Got it.
The biggest problem, and I have this with all my customers who try Backblaze, is that they will say, well, it's still uploading. Well, you got 5-8 terabytes worth of data. Your upload speeds on your internet is very slow compared to your download speeds. And the only thing I can say is you leave the computer on 24 hours a day, and so that it can back up it, because it will back up as fast as it can back up at night. But as soon as you start working on that computer, it stops backing up basically because it wants to give you all the bandwidth to work on your computer, and then it goes back. So it is a very slow process to get the old stuff on there, but it will constantly update the newer stuff and then go back to the old. So it took me, when I first started with Backblaze, it took me 6 months to get all my stuff up.
Yeah,
But I
think it would
had
take several
10 or
months.
12 terabytes at that time.
Yeah, I have Spectrum Internet, and the first night I shut it down, and when it started again in the morning, I realized it's going to take me forever. So I've been letting it run 24 hours a day now for 2 days, I think. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not going to get it done in the 30-day trial.
No,
I have
you
a-
won't get
I
done.
have fiber that they brought up to my house probably 2 years ago. So it seems, I didn't think mine took that long. I had about maybe 5 terabytes when I signed up for Black Blaze, including all my system stuff. And I didn't think it took that long to get there. I thought maybe 2 or 3 weeks, but
Yeah,
if you
that
had-
makes any difference or not.
I have Spectrum Internet, and they are not. They're long story. They're charging me for download 500 megabits, and I'm only getting, when I tested, I only get 100 to 120 megabits per second. Is it? And I've tried. My son has fiber with AT&T, and I contacted them, and they don't have fiber in our neighborhood yet. So
Yeah.
I would love to
Well,
have it.
If you're doing
I-
your downloads over Wi-Fi, that slows it down even if you have fiber. If you can do a direct connect to your box, it will probably speed up your speed quite a bit. At least that's what they told me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can do it not on Wi-Fi, but on a direct connect line, that will be faster. But I have 1,000 gigabytes down, and I only get 35 gigabytes up. And so,
Gigabytes?
yeah,
Well, who do you have it through?
Spectrum, but I'm paying $90, $100 just for internet every month.
So am I, and I'm paying for 500 megabytes and not getting it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I get it, fortunately for where I am, but certain times of the day, like on Saturdays, where everybody's using it, then it slows down quite a bit. But I do get generally eight or 900 going down and about 35 going up.
Wow.
Because I needed that for doing all the Zoom stuff that I do.
Yeah, I was wondering if this backup that it's doing now was going to interfere with my Zoom session today, but it doesn't seem to be, and I guess it's
No, Backblaze will shut itself down when it sees that you're using the internet pretty heavily. So it monitors it. I can't recommend it enough because it's your third backup, and if you lose everything else, it is the cheapest $80, $90 a year that you can spend to protect your files.
Yeah.
Either that or Carbonite, but I tried Carbonite. I don't like how they work compared to Backblaze, and I definitely recommend Backblaze to everybody to have a good backup system.
What did you not like about Carbonite?
Well, first of all, Carbonite does not like Macintosh computers, and Carbonite wouldn't back up any external hard drives.
Oh, that's a big deal.
That's a big deal. I think they fixed it since then, but when I first started with them, I started trying them because they were the one at the time, and then I read the fine print, and it says, "Oh, and by the way, Mac people, we can't back up any of your external drives. You can only back up your internal drive." And I go, well, all my stuff's external. That doesn't do me any good. So
yeah, I noticed Backblaze was trying to back up my backup drive, which is 12 terabytes, I think, until I went through the options and turned that off.
Yeah, what you can do is I turn a lot of that off, and I pick specific drives that I wanted to back up first. And then I kept adding more drives, because I have some of my photo files are on old separate drives, the older files. So then I did those last, and I sort of did it incrementally by hard drives, and just kept adding the ones on, because then anytime they see something changes, they update that file, and they'll even give you a 30-day history, which is pretty nice. Or I pay extra to get a 1-year history. So all my files are backed up for, I can go backwards a year on a particular file, which can be handy once in a while.
Yeah.
But that's an extra cost, of course. So, you know, you got to watch out how much you end up spending with them. But it's a good it's a good service. But it is slow.
It's definitely a sunken feeling when you get it's like, oh no, I just lost all my pictures or whatever. Like,
I
oh,
can't imagine. Where are their servers located? Do you know?
They got them across the country.
Domestically, though, right?
Yeah, they have some in the United States. So, yeah, and they have quite a few. Once you get into their newsletter stuff, about once a month, they'll talk about how things are going with them and how many hard drives they've got going in their server farms. It's just amazing how many hard drives they must have running, because it's thousands upon thousands of hard drives.
I wanted to make sure they weren't a Chinese company with all that's going on with between the drones and TikTok.
Yeah. No, they are an American. They have an American where they store the stuff here in this country, because it'd be too far and they'd have too much loss.
Jeff, I like what you said earlier, and that I like, I don't use it, but I believe it is a great third option. I still believe in having your regular hard drive at home, but I also like is like having that online just in case if something, God forbid, something happened at your home too.
Yeah. And I've had that happen where I've had my power line struck by lightning and it came down the pole and wiped out both my primary hard drive and my backup hard drive all at the same time. And I ended up going down to my third hard drive, which was an offsite hard drive. Since it wasn't connected, I could restore from that. But I then would have had Backblaze as my next step. And I've gotten close enough where I've almost had to use Backblaze. So
I think you've heard a couple times I'm so paranoid, I actually even unplug my computer from the wall. And that's how paranoid I am.
Yeah.
Because like what you said, I've had lightning strikes too, because I'm right down the road from where you are.
Yeah.
So,
no, I run battery backups that have a pretty strong surge protector now, so that protects most of the equipment pretty well.
I had to replace my refrigerator a couple years ago because of a lightning storm that came through and wiped out the electronics.
Yep. It happens, I was real close to getting a full house surge protector put in by my circuit panel, just because when we get storms out here, our poles get hit all the time.
I have the lightning, whatever on the outside, the lightning strike, capacitor, whatever it is called in that resistor. I have that actually on the house, but there's nothing wrong because of like, well, let's say if that something fails, because I have the Monster Power, like for home theater, that's how I have my computer hooked up to that too. So I'm pretty fussy on that.
Yeah. No.
So, but I think this is good to always kind of review this every so often, how important it is for backups. I mean, we have a lot of, when you think about it, it's almost brings almost tears to your eyes, but that's your history. Your pictures are your history. That's your life,
Speaking of that, we had an interesting conversation last meeting at the Racine Camera Club. There was a presentation on copyright, and the president of the club said that he had packaged up and sent to copyright office in Washington, D.C. for $70, 500 images. And he said the reason that he did that was not so much to copyright the images, but to have a legacy when he dies. He has no children, him and his wife, that his images will just be gone. And he said putting them into the copyright offices puts them into the National Archives, and those will live there forever.
Wow, I was not aware, and that's cool. And when you think about it, You said $500 was the price?
70, he said he paid $70 for 500
500.
images.
Okay, well, that's really pocket change, and I think that's actually really cool and neat.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about doing that too, because I've thought about that. You know, I'm in my 70s, and when I'm gone, my son has no interest in photography, and my images will be all gone. They might
Yeah,
stay
it's-
online for a while, you
Yeah.
know.
It's sad because, you know, you even think, because I got some old pictures, 100-year-old pictures, and that, you know, the generation, you know, next generation is like, well, who's that? Or they don't care anymore. It's like, well, I don't care about great grandma or grandpa. You know, I never met them. So it is kind of history that, you know, some of the stuff we throw out.
Yeah, yeah. And if they're in the National Archives, they become, I think it's after, I forgot, 70 years after your death, they become public domain.
Yeah.
And so people 100 years from now can go in and look, oh, look at these pictures. Look at these pictures of Iceland when there was ice.
Yeah. It's just not the simplest thing to do, copywriting your images these days. There's a lot of paperwork with it. It's gotten a lot harder than it used to be. I used to do all my stuff because I could do it in bulk. Now that you have to list every individual picture that you want copyrighted down in a special spreadsheet and along with the images. So
What kind of
just-
information do they require in that listing?
there's all sorts of stuff. It's just not a quick thing to do anymore. They, of course, as with any government thing, they've just turned it into a nightmare trying to do it. It used to be so simple. I could upload, 1,000 images in 5 minutes and have all those. And I do. I have a couple thousand images registered for copyright. And then they changed the rules one year, and I go, this is way too much work to do for it. And I think it's gotten a little better lately. I haven't checked to see what exactly what you have to do, but take a look, go to copyright.gov. Make sure you go to copyright.gov and not copyright.com, because that's a place that will charge you for it. And they'll walk you through what you all have to go through to do it. But you only want to do probably your best images, and then doing that, it's definitely can be worthwhile. I never thought about it as a historical thing. That might get me to do some of my stuff again.
Yeah, so what's the website again?
Copyright.gov.
Copyright, okay.
RIGHT, right? Or is it WRITE?
RIGHT.
They did come out with kind of a newer system for small claims on copyright rather than the big ones, and that is a little less overwhelming to do. Your claims though are capped at a much lower rate than if you were to file a regular copyright claim, but it was done kind of to help smaller businesses, smaller photographers to help protect our work. So that might be something you want to look at. I assume, in fact, it says here, options to resolve certain copyright disputes that involve up to $30,000. So, which for most of us, I mean, if you're got an image infringed, unless it's a Pulitzer Prize winning image, hey, you can get up to 30,000 off of the claim, So it really is designed for individual photographers more than the big the main copyright processes.
Yeah, we'll have to maybe see if we get somebody that does it once in a while come and talk to us about it, because I used to know how to do it, and then they changed the rules. I haven't looked lately to see what the new rules are for registering copyright.
If I know we did at one of our photo festivals a number of years ago, we had somebody come in and do a whole presentation on copyright. We should try and figure out who that was, and maybe we can get her on here. Or I guess the speaker, Drema, that spoke to Racine, who was that, a local lawyer or was it a
No, the president was, well, they just did a presentation from someone in the club that
Oh.
had researched it. But it was the president, David Fabian, was
Yeah.
telling me about what he did.
Thank
as
you
far
for
as-
bringing that up, Drema. I think it's really
Yeah.
kind of cool and fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought so too. That's now on my list of things to do. Pick out my top 500, for example, and make
Yeah.
JPEGs and make them, a good size and maximum size and that sort of thing.
Yep.
Oh, I think it's neat.
Yeah, okay. I got one question from Barry Samansky. He wants to know where the best place is to get enlargements for photos. That's one question. And then the other is where to trade lenses for the best prices. Anybody have any good suggestions for trading in used equipment and where to get a good enlargement?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've used KEH for selling and buying equipment, and I've been happy
Yeah.
with it.
I've used KEH as well, and I've used Adorama. It's done pretty decent too.
Yeah.
And one of the nice parts with Adorama is that if you're going to buy some equipment, they give you a little bit more if you're going to turn around right away and buy something. About 10 or 15% more. But
Yeah, I
I've gotten
sold
good
a
deals
lens
from KEH.
Yeah, I sold a lens recently at Arts when they traded up and they gave me a discount, and I figured I got about half of what I could get on eBay. Looked at the prices, but on eBay, then they take a pretty big chunk of it.
Yeah.
And you're right, Drema, I did the same thing too. I traded some of my stuff in at Arts and that, and I know at the time, I don't know if they still do it, it was like 10% more that they gave you. Of course, that was an in-store credit. So it does help. And it is actually kind of nice to do a little research and kind of see what your equipment is worth.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of stuff sitting here from still 2 years ago. I think I switched to mirrorless, and I still have stuff that I have from my DSLR days. I'm using one of them lenses on my mirrorless with an adapter, but
Yeah.
I traded my telephoto in.
A guy came in, I picked up a flash. I drove all the way to Madison to the camera company, and I really do like them. They actually got two in Madison and that. Anyways, had $1,052 later, walked out the store. But a guy came in selling some of his camera equipment. So what they did is like, okay, they do a background check to make sure it's not stolen or fallen off a back of a pickup truck. But they say their policy is they usually wait 2 weeks and then they send you a check.
Who is that?
This is the camera company in Madison.
Oh.
So some of his equipment that he had, old guy, probably in the 70s or whatever. And some of his equipment is so old that they weren't interested in it. But it is kind of nice to still go and show up and kind of get an idea what they're expecting or what you can expect from your equipment.
Yeah, there's the company online. It's MDB. Is that the acronym?
Yeah, I was just looking that one up too. MPB Photo, I think.
Yeah,
No,
MPB. Yeah, I've used them.
MPB. Yeah.
I've used them a couple times. In fact, the last time their prices were a little bit higher than KEH for the same equipment.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I've heard some negative things about buying from them. I've never heard much about selling to them.
I've bought some stuff from them, one or two items, and they actually it worked really nice. I was looking for a GPS that goes on top of my camera, and Nikon discontinued it something like 8 or 9 years ago, and they had two of them in stock that were used, and I ordered it, got it within 2 days, and it was just as they described it and worked fine. they're sort of nice in that they sell a lot of the old lenses and cameras down to South America and Europe, where so they tend to give you just a little bit more in price than
I heard some
KEH.
complaints.
KEH just sells locally within the U.S.
I heard some complaints on Facebook about, and I don't know how valid they are, but they were complaining that their method is you send your equipment to them, they analyze it, they tell you what they're going to pay you for it and send you a check.
Yeah.
So if you don't agree on that amount, you have to pay shipping back? I don't know.
No, they just ship it back to you. KEH does the same thing. You get a rough price on what they think it's worth, and you ship it to them. They check it over, make sure, and tell you if that's the true value of it, and then they'll send you a check, or if you say no, they'll send it back. Adorama has you just ship them the stuff, and then they tell you how much it's worth, whether you want a check or credit. And if you say yes, they give you the check or the credit. And if you say no, they send the stuff back to you.
Well, that sounds a little bit better than eBay.
Yeah, I would never trust eBay, to be honest.
I agree with you. One thing is I kind of worry about is sending the stuff. If it falls off in a backup, pickup truck or whatever, you see people, throwing boxes and that. And I've had some stuff thrown, but at least with my camera equipment, that never has happened. But I've seen some broken stuff.
You're talking about buying though, right, Clint?
Yeah, buying, well,
yeah, I'm talking about selling on eBay.
Yeah.
Selling,
yeah,
and they take a bigger and bigger chunk. It's really surprising. I think I saw something that they took like almost 30% when it came to everything, all the fees and everything.
Ooh.
You are selling, when you sell to KEH or Adorama or MPB, you are selling wholesale. So you got to remember that when you get your pricing from them, that you are selling wholesale, because they have to price it up and resell it.
Right.
So I've had good luck with Adorama. I've been using them lately. But yeah, the other thing is, if you see KEH is in town, I found that they tend to give you a better price, and they give you a check right away. You take it in. Allied Digital Photo had KEH in town last summer, and I brought them. I had a bunch of old Minolta film cameras, believe it or not, 5 or 6 of them. I got $70 a piece for a film camera, because they had a place they were selling them at a good markup. And for me, they were just junk cameras sitting here, and they took all 7 of them, and I had $350 cash. I walked out. But I also sold a Nikkor 200 to 500 Zoom that I paid $1,400 for, and I got $950 for it. And I never would have thought I'd get that much money for it, and it was worth. But the guy looked at it right there, and he wrote me a check, and I walked out of the store with like $1,500. I couldn't believe it. So if you can find it when KEH is in town, you can really, do pretty well.
Do you know any store in Wisconsin that's dealing strictly with film merchandise? A friend of mine's he's got an RB67 with 3 lenses plus the bellows, plus he's got a 4x5 setup, and the lights and the whole 9 yards from a studio kind of thing. But and it looks like brand new. I went and looked at it. I don't think the stuff had been used that much at all wherever it came from. So I was just trying to help him there. I thought there was a place out in Oregon, something like that dealt strictly with film stuff, but I couldn't. For some reason, I can't seem to find it anymore. But.
Yeah, I don't know anybody that does strictly film. I sold all my stuff to KEH, and yeah, I didn't get much for it. I think $250 for an RB67 body, and another $50 for the lens. I mean,
Yeah.
he's going to
This-
take a big bath. That
Yeah.
if it was one of the
Mhm.
Mamayas that could take a digital back, you get a little bit more money for it. But the film ones aren't bringing hardly any money.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's sad in some
Yeah,
ways.
I mean, this camera looks like it's brand new. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
unbelievable how nice it is. So,
Yeah.
but, same with the 4x5, but I had 4x5 ambitions years ago, but not anymore. So,
Yeah. These days, the 4x5s hardly bring any money. I sold a couple studio cameras to KEH, and I got like $70, $80 for a 4x5. That I paid well over $1,000 for. So
You know, it's hard because, you know, you're kind of forced to. It's funny because last night I was talking about to an individual, you know, it's nice to always try to upgrade and that, but when you don't upgrade for so many years, oh, it's so extremely expensive to start, you know, from almost from scratch. So
Yep.
it's good to kind of, you know, you hate to say this, recycle the stuff, and then you don't take such a bath in that, you know, on your old equipment.
well, some of the old equipment you can sell to high schools, and not sell, but donate to high schools and get a tax deduction.
Okay.
So you know that is something that you can do, because the schools are all looking for film cameras and you know older digital cameras. So
I'm
that's
actually
one
kind of
way.
I'm actually surprised that they're doing that, but I think it's great that they do that because they want the old film so you understand all the concepts, aperture, priority, this new stuff. Well, think about our phones and that. We got our phones, just point and shoot and just go,
Yeah.
people don't understand.
Yeah. So
So very, very fascinating.
yeah. Okay, well, I think it's well past noon.
okay.
75
Thanks.
here.
We'll call it a day, and we'll see everybody next month. And hopefully, you guys have a good month of May. Don't forget the Wacko competition, and God, that's next weekend, I think.
Wow.
God, this month is April went quick. So thanks everybody for coming. We'll have a good speaker next month, and then we'll see what I'm going to come up with after that. So without that, we'll say goodbye and see you in May.
Okay, take care.